to call the meeting to order. Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Can I have a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of, for the purpose of discussing matters pertaining to the employment history of a particular person?
So move.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great, we're in executive session. Thank you. Yeah, since nobody's here, we should.
Elaine and Tom, thanks for your flexibility to come early for that.
Acceptance of the agenda at that time?
No,
Okay.
no.
All right. Could I get a motion to accept tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
So tonight we'll start with some updates from our administrators, and then move to our committee reports, and particularly the opportunity to follow up on our two meetings, both our board meeting and presentation from last Thursday, which put together a comprehensive presentation of our capital bond projects. And then there was a Q&A on Saturday. So this is a chance for the board to provide some feedback, and we'll also have an opportunity for community comment. We appreciate the comments over the last two meetings, and look forward to your input tonight. And then subsequently, we have also, I guess, the true launch of our budget season, which occurs over a period of a handful of meetings over the next couple of months. And so we have two important processes moving forward with the bond and our budget. And so we'll have a presentation about that subsequently. So thank you, Carol, because I know you're leading a lot of that work, and I really appreciate your efforts. I just want to start the meeting by thanking you. Dr. Harrison.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, as Mr. Hannaford, for joining us tonight. As always, we have the pleasure to acknowledge some of the great work that's happening across our school district. And actually, this evening, as we sit in the room tonight, we have a student art exhibit that has launched down at the Irvington Public Library entitled Rooted, which is an exhibition of works created by a number of our Irvington High School art students. So we'd encourage you folks to head on down there and check out their beautiful talents. It will be on view from February 1st to the 27th. The special program tonight, which there was a reception that's from 6:30 to 8, was actually curated by Julia Hersig and Nicole Radlauer, two of our art students here in Irvington. So we're quite proud of them, and we'd encourage everybody to visit the library, the gallery, to be able to see some of the fine work of our students. Back on February 1st, we had the opportunity of celebrating World Read Aloud Day, and if you follow us on Facebook, you could see a prominent article there, and of course on our website as well. It's really an exceptional experience where we have so many different important folks from our community come in and read to our elementary students. So when I look, so many of our trustees participated and were an important part of that day. But we had a number of other special guests that joined us from our state Senate Majority Leader, Andrea Stewart-Cousins. We had Meredith Vieira, who not only came but stayed longer and shadowed our students through a PLTW STEM class for the day and engaged in the activities, which was an amazing experience. And we have a story forthcoming on that in our social media that you'll be able to check out. Our county legislator, Mary Shimsky, our chief of police, so many other important folks that connected with our students and read a common book that really focused in and around the topic of kindness. So it was an exceptional day, and one that was enjoyed by our students and staff, and really was a positive feel throughout the school day. So on behalf of all of our teachers, our administrators in the elementary school, Ms. Marinello and Ms. Chatnick, we extend special thank you to all of our important guests on that day. Additionally, we have some other great events that are coming up. Our marching band is going to be performing at Citi Field in an Irvington Day, where we have about 115 students that will perform on April 27th. If you're interested in joining to come out to celebrate with Irvington, there's links to registration information on the district Facebook page. We're also in the midst of kindergarten registration. So if anyone has a child turning 5 by December 31st, or know a neighbor or a friend, someone who has a child that would fall into that category, we encourage them to register. We have registration dates that are set up in May and, in February, the 26th that afternoon and the 27th in the morning, and again in the evening session on the 28th. All the information is on the district website, and we certainly would encourage folks to attend. We have Irvington High School Drama Club presentation just around the corner with an opening night of March 7th for The Addams Family, a new musical comedy, which we're really looking forward to, and I can tell you our students and our staff advisors are really excited. With our last fall play, with the support of our faculty and our faculty association, there was a preview evening for the senior citizens in our community, where it was a dinner and a show. And we are excited to be making that a tradition. We started it in the fall, and it's going to carry over to the spring, so we thank our faculty and all of our students for being a part of that, and communications and promotions for that will be going out in the next week or so. So there's many, many exciting things that happen. We ask that you just stay tuned to all of our school newsletters, the district newsletter. If you are not subscribed to the district newsletter, please shoot an email to me or give a call to my office. We'll make sure we sign you up to receive it. And then follow us on Facebook, and of course, check out our website from time to time. I'm going to spare Ms. Stein from reporting on any news tonight, because I think Mr. Hanna accurately represented where her efforts have been focused, split between budget and the capital project. So again, too, I would like to thank you for all your hard work and dedication there. Dr. Kaur, though, has some exciting news to share about some opportunities coming up for our students.
So for those of you that are connected to especially our elementary newsletters, but I think it's been all over, March 23rd is our science fair, and we are really excited. I want to say it's the 4th. I can't believe it's the 4th annual science fair. When this started 5 years ago, and in the idea, we thought, like, how do we create something that just becomes a tradition here in Irvington? And sometimes things take off and sometimes they don't. Well, the science fair has, and I'm not looking at you, so I don't know what the numbers are right now for registration, but so what happens now is, like, it's sort of there's the slow start, and then all of a sudden it like ramps up. But we are excited about offering this opportunity again for our students, and we have now posted, so we're anxious to see who of our teachers and staff members step forward to be judges at the science fair. So we are anxiously awaiting their sign up as well. So it's really become an amazing community event, and PTSA has just done an incredible job of not only developing it, organizing it, sustaining it, but really each year making it just a little bit better. So we're excited. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's been amazing. I've appreciated the chance to go and attend, and the energy is amazing. The work of all the students is great, and you have other opportunities to learn about what's happening around our STEM programming, so not to be missed. I forgot to mention also tonight, and I know we have some people here looking forward to that conversation. It's that time of year where we start to look ahead to our calendar for 2019-20. So next year, and so we'll hear about that and have some discussion as well. I did want to share a statement from the Board of Education related to communications that we've sent previously. The district's ongoing review in matters related to the leave records of a specific employee are ongoing. The Board of Education will continue to update the community regarding this matter to the extent legally permissible. The board will consider and implement all necessary and appropriate steps in addressing the identified concerns. The board has already determined that it is necessary to retain the appropriate professionals to conduct an independent audit of the district's human resources practices and processes. So, thank you. And with that, we will move to our committee reports. And I guess we should end with the discussion around the Buildings and Grounds. And I don't know if we have other reports ready to go. Okay, I see
Yeah,
the
just,
taker at the end of the row here.
well, we will be talking about buildings and grounds, but previously, the Safety Committee, which we always report on, did in fact have a presentation from Carol Stein and Chris Harrison, in which other members of the community also were brought up to date on the capital bond planning. And then we had a similar meeting with the PTSA at their general membership meeting. And I wanted to add on that on March 1st for the PTSA, there'll be International Culture Night from 5 to 8 p.m. on March 1st, which I believe is a Friday. And then in terms of what's going on in the village, for those of you who've been following the Pollinator Pathway Project, which has some intersection with some conversations that have gone on here lately, that will be held on February 26th, Tuesday night, at 7 p.m. at the Senior Center. And that's the third in a list of speakers who've been coming to speak about the Pollinator Pathways Project.
I'll also add that we have an upcoming curriculum meeting. The last one was on the 22nd, but it was dedicated towards preparation for the presentation that night. We talked about that.
We had a roundtable discussion.
We had the roundtable discussion.
Around
That's what that was for.
social emotional well-being and also looking at shared.
So the next, and the social emotional piece, and the next meeting is on the 26th of this month after the break. I believe it's Tuesday, I think I want to say. Some things that we'll be looking at is science and professional development assessment, things to that effect.
And Policy Committee got canceled, so we did not have this month. Our next meeting is next month.
Okay. Also along the lines of what you were sharing, Dr. Harrison, we do have a board brief email that we send out at the beginning of each month. And that gives a list of all of our actions and links to our presentations and meeting video and other matters that we've addressed in prior meetings and speaks to upcoming meetings. So that's a great opportunity to sign up if you want to be able to track the work of the board. I highly encourage you to do that. So with that said, are there any other matters? So with the Buildings and Grounds, again, we had the opportunity last Thursday to hear a presentation. You're looking much better. I appreciate, Brian, that you came and led that presentation, knowing that you were having to struggle with the flu. You did a great job. And it was very informative, and we're covering a lot of ground in terms of maintenance of our facilities, keeping our students and staff safe with both some infrastructure projects, and again, some people have asked, that prior meeting on the 22nd in January was talking about the emotional health and well-being of our students. So that was, if you come to a number of our meetings, we cover a lot of ground, and so some of these are focused on with the bond and infrastructure, but we also have conversations about what's happening in terms of supporting our students and staff in terms of their well-being and feeling of support. And then I think, Deb, you were available to help lead with our administrators and professional partners, the presentation Q&A. It was more of a Q&A, I guess, on Saturday. With Dave, and that was well attended. And we've also had great engagement from our community in terms of participating at those meetings, sending us letters. We've been busy responding to letters and evaluating the information that people have sent us. So certainly if you've previously shared in terms of those prior presentations, we have heard that and we are evaluating it, but we welcome any additional new input that anyone may have. But I also want to give an opportunity for trustees who've had some time to reflect on the presentation. We are, in terms of our process, we will be looking to schedule a meeting following the break, probably also on the 26th, the Tuesday the 26th, but we haven't confirmed that yet. And that would provide an opportunity for any updates or related to the bond. And also on March 5th, the intent is for the board to sign off on our final bond proposal that would then be voted on by the community on May 21st. And prior to that, there will be a number of presentations along the way to help keep informing the community about the different aspects and respond to questions. And as was shared at the meeting last Thursday, we're really looking at the scope of projects and the cost of those projects, but because of limitations in terms of what we can spend prior to the approval of a bond, the design process would occur. So we're able to do some limited explanation of different aspects, and to the degree that we need a little more, I think there's an effort to do that. But the true work of designing the different aspects of those projects would occur in subsequent to approval of a bond. And we would also have a process that would involve stakeholder involvement and the involvement of the board in terms of signing off on various aspects of those designs. But I do, so anyways, given that timeline, we're at a place where with that March 5th sign off, this is a great time for trustees. If you have questions about different aspects that you would be interested in seeing addressed, to share that, because we have the opportunity between now and March 5th to attempt to address those types of questions that you may have.
Well, before I think going to the questions, I think.
Yeah,
we
certainly
were gonna
from
give
the B&G committee,
The
if you would.
B&G wanted to give a little update,
Sure.
so maybe
Great.
that might answer some of your questions.
Perfect.
We could give a little bit of a feedback, for the community as well. So after the meeting on Saturday in particular, both Dave and I attended, and I would say the vast majority of people who were present were there to speak about the Dowsman facility and garage, as I updated the board. We took copious notes. We heard a lot of comments. We've received a lot of letters, and we hear you loud and clear. So I want to make sure that the community understands that I did pass on what was said, because we were not taped on Saturday. There was a few questions about that. But we did take notes. Dave and I made sure that the trustees were brought up to speed. Our next step is B&G will meet. We need to talk to our architects again. We need to go back and talk as a committee. And then the idea is that after the break, we'll be able to come back and have a meeting where we update the entire board. But I've spoken individually to many of the members about the garage in particular, so I don't know if individual members wanted to comment on that, but the bulk of the meeting on Saturday really did address that. We made a pointed decision to make sure we were brief in making the presentation and really giving most of the time on Saturday to the community.
Right, I would say Thursday we had to make sure that we gave the full presentation for the board to review, because we have that responsibility, but the focus Saturday was more on
Hearing and listening.
hearing and listening.
No, I just wanted to comment that I felt that, in addition to letters, of course, we have received some verbal comments from people in the community who reached out to members of the board. And in my case, I think it was really important to help to clarify for many people that Saturday's meeting was not a reaction to Thursday's meeting. In fact, Saturday's meeting had always been scheduled and was the subject of a meeting that had, a letter that had gone out to the community on January 4th. And I also want to say that it was always said that Thursday was going to be the first big meeting, the one that we got amazing community input at, and that I really feel that in good faith, everyone on this board was really heartened to hear that kind of participation and information. Information was provided that sometimes when you're in a year-long process, things don't percolate up with the clarity that you would hope they would, and then they do. And I think it was a really successful thing.
It was Dave and I said, for us personally, Saturday morning was always designed for us to be able to listen, because oftentimes with the evening meetings, one, we don't have nearly enough time, but secondly, we don't really have the opportunity to focus as well as we could in the morning.
Yeah, I wanted to add that this has been going on for 3 years now, and that was really an amazing example Saturday morning of transparency and listening and real community engagement for those folks that don't seem to think that exists. It was extremely powerful. People who thought different things, and I mean, some of the perspectives that were brought up were incredible. So like the amount that the community has to offer was around this particular issue. So I learned a couple things there that I thought were really important, and I think we reflected this back to the board, but I think it's important to reflect. One is that some people had some great ideas around this notion of decentralization and thinking about it from that angle. And I'm sure people thought about it, but it was something that I hadn't thought about because we had a small window between the Thursday night and the Saturday. So it was really good for me as a board member to hear, someone on Thursday night I mentioned about factual information, came back on Saturday and came with factual information. And it was so awesome because I wasn't being facetious, I was being honest. Like, these kinds of decisions are based on facts. And so when they came, I mean, just, it was really a great piece. So the decentralization was one. And the second piece is that the community really let us know that we're on track with the bond, and that this is the one sticking point. And so as the board has messaged out to the community a couple times now, is that, Saturday was the time to hear the community. Thursday was the time to hear the presentation as a board for the first time from the B&G committee. Because I want the community to understand how the process works, right? So, and I'm going to reiterate what you said, is that at the very beginning of this process, ages ago, the BOE's responsibility as stewards of the education of the students in this district and the taxpayers of the district is to sit with its administration and garner a list of priorities that they think are important to fix. Then the B&G committee takes that information, shares it with the board, and we start to think about how we can package those things into a bond, right? Then the B&G committee goes to work, and we get updates at the weekly meetings, as everybody can see publicly, and then we come together and we get it presented to us. And Saturday was a real opportunity to hear the whole picture. So it was really, really powerful. So I want to congratulate and thank the community at large, those who are watching, those who are here, and please continue. And there's folks in the room that can attest, if you send us an email, you will get an email back within a day or two, sometimes the same day. And so please reach out with thoughts, concerns, and other items.
And sometimes it takes a little longer, but the intent.
Yes, yes.
But
Sorry.
But either way, the response does reflect we are reading every email, and we want to make
Everyone.
sure that you realize that.
I'd love to give some feedback. I would say that there's always the intent to share information as we progress, and that we had a committee that involved our professional partners, our administrators, including the building principals who are living in those buildings every day and experiencing and assessing the needs, members of the board who are also parents and taxpayers, and also a responsibility as stewards for not just today's students, but long into the future. And that's where this facilities piece becomes important, because it's not just about today, it's about caring for our facilities in a way that they will be in good shape for a long time to come. And this bond process allows us to share it forward, because you're not just paying out of pocket today, but sharing the cost along with future community members, because the value of those projects continues on into the future. But we did learn about components of the project all along and their evolution, and last Thursday's meeting was the first time that it was all brought together in one piece. And certainly, we've been sharing all the different ways in which we try and reach out to the community to make sure that you're informed about what's happening. And now that members of the community have become more engaged in a larger way than sometimes we experience, we don't always have a huge audience at these meetings or in terms of engaging us on our various initiatives. That's great, and we hope that you'll stay beyond this project. I mean, this we'll sign off on this, and it'll continue in terms of our budget process and our bond process into May. So we look forward to your staying engaged in that evolution. I really appreciate the work of the committee and the presentation. I think, again, it's maintaining our facilities. The first thing that we cut when there's a recession, maintaining our facilities. We can never spend enough on our facilities. And we know that when we have big ticket items, that it's hard to do it out of our annual budget. So this gives us an opportunity to do it in a way in which right now we're at historic lows still in terms of our lending rates. A bond process versus our annual capital spending. The state kicks in a percentage, so that's an aid to us as taxpayers in terms of getting that state aid, supporting these projects, and I think 90% of the projects are receiving 29%.
90 should be.
Yeah, but what's the number?
So it's right now, we're getting 29, but I see that it might be a little bit lower, and then again, it
Okay.
might go a little bit higher.
All right,
a
so it's
changing
a
process.
somewhat moving figure, but that's a sizable percentage that the state is kicking in. And I had a lot of questions about security at the last meeting, and I appreciated the professional from Alteris, who I thought did an excellent job in terms of that classic not too much, not too little, in terms of assessing how do we keep our staff safe, how do we keep our students safe, not just from any one scenario, but from a whole host of scenarios. So I really appreciated that feedback. And the area that clearly has been under a lot of discussion is the facilities building. Gary, yesterday, your team, the staff out there was working in the midst of a snowstorm. It's very cold. They have very limited facilities in terms of connecting equipment or addressing any concerns. I think they deserve on the part of the district, of the community, to have places where they can work safely and from some protection from inclement conditions, which we are seeing regularly with heavy rains, with cold, with snow. I think, I'm sorry that didn't occur at some earlier point in our district's history, but we have that opportunity now, and I think we should seriously honor that and commit to that. That being said, we had a lot of input about the facilities building. Mr. Sheps, again, we're sorry that, with you being right next to it, that you weren't aware of it. I know that, there are some members of the community in terms of the surrounding area that were aware, but, it's certainly when you hear about something that is close to you, it becomes much larger and you pay close attention. So even though we've had lots of communication, I appreciate that as you're learning about now, you're getting up to speed quickly, you have a lot of questions. I think we've been trying hard to be responsive to that. And similarly, we've had an opportunity to learn. I think, I'm going to, not to be, it's a little hard. I've never heard of anybody say anything nice about that piece of concrete until now. I live nearby. I've played on it with my daughter, basketball. I've always thought, wow, it'd be nice to have something better. So I take pictures of deer outside my window on a regular basis. I'm well aware of the groundhogs and the skunks and all the other animals that are wandering about, coyotes, and what was it last week? A coyote, a fox that lives on Clinton, I think, and I see running around. So we are full of animals, and where I live, we have next door 170 trees. Like the district, we don't put pesticides or herbicides other than in terms of caring for a few of our trees. I love that copper beech that's up on the property, and that certainly struck home to me in terms of what people have shared about that. Mr. Mattarelli, thank you for your very detailed email to the
Excellent.
We also heard from some others who sent some really comprehensive and thoughtful consideration. The reason that pavement, which I don't find so attractive or great, I wouldn't ever call it a green space, but it has certainly a strong root structure underneath it, and that's probably why it doesn't look so great now. My question is in the future, if we're not to do anything there, I don't know where we go with that. I certainly don't want to disrupt the trees there, and to do anything there sounds like that's a question. So if there's an answer, if there's a way to do work there that doesn't harm our trees, I want to know it, because if not, that's a real concern. And the decentralization idea that you shared, Dave, I hope is something that, where there's a will, hopefully we can find a way. I know that you've tried very hard. I know that we'll share an update that talks about the different locations we've looked at and the challenges to them. But perhaps with decentralization, we also get some smaller scale, and that maybe allows us to, I would hope for your staff that if we have something maybe at the campus and something that Dow's Lane, that's also logistically better for your team in terms of having the equipment where it needs to be. So I would ask, and if the board agrees, that we could look at those types of considerations. But I really do hope as a board we commit to supporting. We do it for our students. I mean, we have folks here who helped launch the walking school bus. Certainly, we've been involved in all sorts of pedestrian safety and traffic safety measures, both as a part of the district and as community members. I would ask our partners in the village, please help us move forward in improving the crosswalk at Heritage Hill and Broadway. I've been on the board 4 years. That process started before I was on the board. I'd like us to see it finished. So we're pushing hard on a lot of different fronts, and we certainly care about the safety of our students and our staff. And I want to give our custodial and grounds staff the opportunity to be able to work in safe, appropriate conditions, and for us to maintain our equipment so that it has a longer life. So I've gone on, but I think I think we have the opportunity to keep looking at other options.
I want to add one thing for younger families that might not be aware, that I know that you've been asking for this kind of, the grounds crew has been asking for this since before I even got on the board, and it doesn't fit in the operating budget with the tax cap. And, because I've heard people ask questions, why can't we put certain things in the operating budget? Why do we need a bond? And you just want people to know prospectively that this has been something that's been on a list of things for years and years, outside of where it goes. Just the idea that it's something that is not been able to be achieved for a lot of different reasons. So I just thought that was important.
Yeah, and to Dave's point, I think it's also probably a good idea for us to do maybe a little bit better job clarifying that the capital bond can only be for capital improvements.
Yep.
We did hear a lot of questions on Saturday. Why can't we take the money and put it towards curriculum development or the language program or hiring another teacher? And we did our best to clarify again on Saturday that that is not what we are allowed to do under law for this particular capital bond.
I think it's a great system. I mean, it essentially is developed, again, when budgets are tight, what are we going to cut? We can hold off on fixing the boiler and the roof another few years. And you see districts in our region and around New York that do put it off. And that's not being, I don't think we're being good stewards at that point. So there's this process that gives us a number of financial advantages to do it this way. But part of it is to make sure that we sustain that commitment to maintaining our facilities. And it is separate from what we do with our annual budget. If you are interested in that social emotional health piece or that curriculum piece, we're going to be talking about that as part of our annual budget process, and we would like to see you there too, because it's all important and we're trying to stay focused on all of it. And with that, if there are no other thoughts, thank you, and I think please keep, do I want to give you a chance, and then also I guess we should give people an opportunity to ask questions.
Yeah, I certainly don't want to be redundant to any of the comments of our trustees, but it has been a tremendous process, a process where the engagement really truly is informing and influencing the work, and I think that as we move forward and we look to a future special board meeting coming up the week after break, as alluded to, potentially the 26th, I think the community is going to be pleased to see the consideration that's been put into the project, and we're looking at next steps. And certainly no promises to exactly where we are now, but I can tell you that the level of communication that has come forth from the community, the emotional stories. We sat here, and not only was it hearing from experts, Mr. Nanarelli and a number of others, Mr. Richardson as well. So many knowledgeable, passionate folks. Then Mr. Sheps, who has an expertise in the field as well. But the passion, the emotion associated with it, and that's what Irvington's about. We talk about it being people, we talk about it being relationships, and that's what we felt and saw. We had a youngster get up at a meeting and share his experiences, and that was just, it was so touching. And the number of stories about folks learning to ride a bicycle themselves, adults, on that basketball court that Mr. Hanna referenced, and then the conversations about generations that have followed. To talk about playing in the fields and thinking of that being an extended backyard for the Irvington community. So I think our work as we move forward is certainly going to honor that, and it's going to be reflective of the community spirit and the community values. So I'm really looking forward to the next steps and the continued community engagement, not only as the board looks to finalize the scope and a target dollar amount, but then when we pivot after May 21st, to be able to engage folks and to hear feedback about design and specifics related to particular projects.
And I think that's, I mean, another idea that has been put out there and something that we can consider and maybe come back with some more thinking on, which is, you know, we are always looking for engagement. We are always looking for volunteers. I mean, the basis of the letter I wrote to the community as part of our newsletter last year was about the dozens of ways that people can participate. But to the degree that there's interest in shared services, that's hard work. I mean, we have gone out and had those meetings with our neighbors, with the village, even at the county level. So we are trying that, but it's slow. It's hard to set up the meetings. You hear back about the challenges that those entities are having. And certainly if we can create a stakeholder committee, that's an opportunity going forward that we can continue to look at. Similarly, you know, we're hearing a lot about green deals. I think it would be great in terms of a sustained approach. I know there's a lot going on at the district level. At the Dalles, there's been recycling of food waste, which is I've been really impressed to learn about, and I'm excited about that partnership between community members and the district and the building staff. This project has a lot of benefit in terms of what we could get from LED lighting. But we looked at other opportunities, and they're really expensive. And if we really care, if that's a value, you know, right now we have a tax-neutral proposal so that, you know, as we reduce debt service, this bond will take the place of it. But to do some of these bigger ideas, it's expensive, and we would definitely need some solid work and some strong support from the community to say this is a value that we're ready to put our money behind, because that's a challenging decision to do, particularly, you know, with the attack on our salt here in New York, which we're very aware of. Carol, I don't know, you know, if you have something you'd like to share. I know that over the years, just in December, you gave a presentation on long-range planning, something that we've been really excited about to think about, not just this year, but multi-year. You're doing this capital bond. You helped, along with the negotiation team, to settle an agreement with our IFA last year, and we're working to do that with our administrators and custodial as well. So there's a lot we don't control, but to the degree that we can manage our costs, we're trying to do that, and I appreciate that big picture work that you're doing for us. So with that, if again, I hope you hear that we've been hearing you, but if you would like to comment or ask questions around the bond at this point, I'd like to give you the opportunity. We'd ask that you go to the microphone, that you share your name, and that you keep your comments or questions to approximately 3 minutes. There'll be other opportunities later in the meeting for other items as well. So if you'd like to go to the microphone, this is an opportunity for you.
I live on Station Road. So I wasn't clear. You had mentioned that a lot of the specifics won't be defined until we pass the bond. But I wasn't sure the location of the building, not the design of the building. Does that have to be in print before we vote on the bond? So let's say we want a
Right.
facilities building. Do we have to say it will be in this location before the bond is voted on?
Is there any wiggle room
Yes,
with location?
no, it does have to be specified, because that has to be part of the seeker resolution. So that does, so we will be letting, that's important.
It's a great question.
So before March 5th?
By March 5th, you would know
Okay.
the location of whatever we propose,
Okay,
and
thank
where it's
you.
being cited. Thank you. That's a great question. Thank you.
Sorry I missed last week's meeting. I'm Erin Bernstein. I'm the parent of a third grader at Dow's Lane. Is this working?
Yes?
Is it? Okay. First, I will say thank you. I have gone to all the board meetings. I've seen the
One of our
evolution.
best attendees.
Usually the only one, so this is kind of intimidating. I want to say thank you because I have seen the evolution of the bond. I also think it's great to have community feedback. I mean, I don't know if any of us work in an office. You know, when you have a group that works on a committee, inevitably that group doesn't always think of everything that might go on. And I know I personally looked at the presentation with the building and said, Is there anywhere else it could go? I'm not an expert. I didn't see anything. I didn't know all the personal, heartfelt stories that came to light on Facebook. I do just want to say one thing as a community. We live in an amazing community, and while Facebook is great for sharing information, like, I just wish we didn't have to get so angry and personal and nasty sometimes. And like, we all are really smart people that should be able to have constructive debates based on fact. And it's hard, I know, sometimes to separate emotion, but I just hope as a community, like, these things should bring us together. And I think this, like, our community's shining, right? Like, you've gotten a lot of feedback, a lot of amazing letters. Mr. Navarrete, I read that letter, I was like, well, I've just been swayed. Like, it's, you know, and I didn't really have much of an opinion, but I was like, well, that's pretty striking. So, you know, and I think it's that type of feedback that's just really helpful, because none of us know what we don't know, and getting really good constructive feedback is really helpful. And I do think this is all a shared decision. I think, you know, you guys aren't experts in every one of these things, but we have a community full of knowledge, full of ideas, and I hope that we can work together to share ideas really constructively going forward. And it's been an emotional week, and I'm going to cry. But anyway, I do want to say thank you, because a lot of time goes into this, and you guys put a lot of time into every meeting and every other committee meeting and everything else. And then foreign language plug. So I hope that during the budget proposal that we are going to see the Flex initiative brought forward. I will continue just to say that that's not the ideal initiative, but I welcome the step in the right direction. And I think the Flex proposal is a product of coming to the board meetings, working with our administration, and trying to make a change and make it productively and constructively. So for anyone who's watching, like, it really does make a difference. It was a lot of meetings I've been going to, but it did work. I think it worked. Like, we got a proposal. Whether or not it's going to make it through the budget, Carol has $200,000 in her long-range planning. I've already thanked her for it. I don't know, but it does work, and like, you have to be in it to win it. So I'm going to say that, and there's lots of things we still have to fix. I'm not going to deny that we're not perfect.
I think you can do a mic drop there. That's really good. Yeah. Good mic drop. That was excellent. I want to respond to two pieces. That I think you're absolutely right that you know, a single social media post or a phone call or email is a start, but the engagement that you and others in the community have shown, I think, is really impressive. And you're right. I mean, we have to look at it, as you've seen, through a matrix of a whole host of other things that are priorities as well, and a limit in terms of what's available in the budget. But ultimately, moving things forward takes a sustained approach, a polite, what's the term I use? Polite persistence. Thank you. You've heard it before. But for any person, and I hear what you're saying. But what we do appreciate is that people stick with it, if there's another way to say it, because everything takes, you know, we have 7 trustees, we have an administration, we have our staff, we have our students, we have a whole community, and many of these things require trying to align all of them, and that's not an easy process, particularly when you have multiple priorities. And the other piece I wanted to respond to, because we don't talk about it too much publicly, is Facebook or social media, Twitter. I'm not on it. Maybe some of you are. You're not going to find us on there that much, particularly because we work as a body. Our authority comes from working together and voting as a board. And when we speak, our protocols are that Dr. Harrison or myself typically represent the board, though in this process we've adjusted, and you'll be seeing emails from other trustees as well. But we're not going to jump on and try and keep up with the pace of social media. It's just not possible in terms of the way we're organized. So it really it is the emails, it is the attendance at these meetings is the way to constructively work with us. And it's a small community, so I think all of us see ourselves as partners with you. Not all the time, but when you see us, I certainly am happy to speak with you on a one-on-one basis if you see me at Jourdain's or down at Bazaar or wherever it is. And I know that many of the trustees here are happy to speak with you as well when there are those opportunities. But social media is not really the place we're going to get involved And that's just the way it is. So, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments?
I'm Pat Nettarelli. I live at 29 Maple Street, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Graber and Dr. Harrison for getting back to me so promptly after I submitted my comments to the board. And I'm glad to see that you're going to go back and revisit some of the issues that were raised regarding the maintenance building. My only concern is, do you think you have enough time? I know you've done work previously for this bond. Do you think you have enough time, though, to really take a good look at this and come up with alternatives now? Because you're talking like by March 5th, you really want to have, you want to have it firmed out as to what's going to be in that bond act. So I'm just concerned that you may not have enough time to really go back and take a look at this. So I'd just like to hear your comments on that. Thanks.
Mr. Nattermelli, and if I could speak for the committee, I believe that we have an adequate amount of time before us. While we may be sitting here in this important meeting tonight, we know that our professional partners and a team of them are actually looking at a variety of options as we're doing other business. So where they've heard the feedback, they are in attendance at those meetings, and we've communicated the other feedback that we've received through personal communications, through emails to them. They are actively looking at those other options. So not only is it size, location, but geez, what's under the ground there? Are there utilities there that we can't build upon? Or if there are utilities there, how do we move utilities? What are the effects on the overall environment, and not just thinking environment along the lines of the conversations that we've had in this room over the past week, but when we think about student learning spaces, when we think about the effects on the staff experience and making sure that everything has synergies associated with it, they get the broader concerns and are really focused on that now. So right now, I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to arrive in a place that we're going to have some real sound recommendations that will come to the board in 2 weeks, and that will inform the ultimate decision the board would have to make in the beginning of March.
It's not just addressing the issues that were raised about the particular site, the basketball court, but looking at other sites again and seeing, how they stack up. I mean, the plan will give you instead of a matrix.
If you're gonna, we need you at the mic, just for the other people who watch. Yeah, right. Just so that the folks who are watching, they can hear what you said.
I have to tell people that all the time at the planning board meeting, so I'm sorry.
It's like not remembering your own phone number because you never have to say it.
But no, I just I want to make sure I understand. It's not just looking at the basketball court site and addressing the issues that I raised regarding that, but again, addressing the alternatives that I was proposing too, in terms of looking at other sites again, and the decentralization, and whatever other thoughts any of the board members have, any other people in the community may have. I just threw those particular alternatives out as what I saw off the top of my head. Not only am I a planner, but I was a real estate management for 20 years. I managed apartment buildings, so I have an idea about management and maintenance of buildings. So again, I just want to make sure that you're looking at the other sites too again, and taking a close look and see what the positives are about those other sites as well as the basketball court.
Yeah. So I 100% agree with your comments and understand your perspective, or I believe I understand your perspective. The beauty to this is referenced before that this has been a process that's been ongoing for well over a year. So when we've sat and we've looked at different ideas and ultimately arrived at a recommendation for Dow's Lane, along that journey, we looked at other spots. We looked at other locations and considered lots of ramifications as referenced before. So we wouldn't be looking necessarily to start from scratch.
Okay.
So there's a foundation that informs that work. So I believe we'll come forward with some responsible recommendations that certainly will put us in a positive position moving forward.
And again, you're looking at the 26th of February as the next meeting, possibly?
It is not confirmed, but once we confirm it, we will get it out to the community as soon as possible.
Okay.
Yeah, I would look for a letter from me or from the Board of Education some point Friday confirming the actual date.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your letter. It was a pleasure to read. It was. I echo what Aaron said. It was
Very good, okay. Well, if you'd like to go to the microphone.
Greetings. My name is Larry Sheps. I live at Dow's Lane. And Chris, did you just say that you were going to examine this from scratch in terms of the location?
No, I think, and if I misspoke, someone please correct me, because if I did, it was in error, that we wouldn't be starting from scratch, that we have a foundation to our work where we've looked at a variety of other locations that we'll be able to revisit in our process, looking towards future recommendations.
Okay. I did some research, and I found the State Education Department Division of Facilities Planning in Albany, and they have a section called Site Standards, Site Selection, and Site Development. And they call it Part 155, Educational Facilities. So basically, they talk about the strategic process of saying, well, we need to build a building, so where are we going to put it? So we have to understand, well, what do we look for as standards to find that site? So we first have to define the standards. So it's rather brief. It says, sites shall be developed to serve natural resources and avoid, and this is all done, directed by the commission, and natural resources and avoid environmental problems within the limits of the educational program. Care shall be taken to ensure that the site and facilities are consistent with and contribute to the school and the community environment and provide for the health and safety of the occupants. So these are pretty high standards. So then they go through a statement of what are site standards. So they say an analysis of the proposed construction project, which would be where we're going to put this maintenance program building, relative to, and they say A, an environmental impact on the site and on the surrounding area, both immediate and long range, including such factors as. So the committee should focus on an environmental analysis of the construction site. And the factors they're looking at are air quality, water quality, noise pollution, ecosystems, wildlife and vegetation, historic, archaeological, and architectural aesthetic resources in the area. So when you're going to say, okay, we're going to put the site in this particular location, you're obligated by the commissioner to say, hey, is this a good spot on a big level, as the standards are high? So they also talk about population concentrations and distribution of public services, traffic patterns, and adjacent land uses. So the commissioner is specifying these are the things you need to look at to make a decision. And then they conclude by saying, your site selection. So once you set up your standards and you say this is an area that has a habitat, maybe we shouldn't look there, or maybe we should look at another place. They say site selection. Environment of the surrounding locale and of the site itself must be considered, with the effect on the locale on the school and the effect of the school on the locale. So I looked up what locale means, and it's a place or area with reference to events connected to it. So the locale of the school is going to have a big circle, and the circle is going to overlap the locale of the community. So the community and the school should be on the same page as to where the site should be selected. So the site must be adapted and the accessibility of the site for school purposes. The site must be reasonably accessible and have favorable existing and future traffic patterns. An elementary school is often near the pupil population served, and the children must not be exposed to unusual traffic hazards while going to and from school. So I'm just making the case that the State Education Department, which is responsible for signing off on a site, is specifying in a document and saying, hey, you need to build a facility. And this must happen all the time. I don't know how many districts there are in the state of New York, but
About 700.
700, so there's 700 school boards that say we need a building, and the commissioners codified how you should look about getting that building. So in terms of selecting the site, I think that the committee should be very aware of these considerations, as the commissioner was, to put them down on paper. And I will conclude by saying, bear with me here. The architect, now that you went through the standards and you said, okay, this is environmentally okay to build a site here, let's select it based on what? So they say the architect and the site planner should become involved early in the consideration of sites so that the technical advice and assistance are available. So you guys, well-intentioned, went ahead and did that, and you made some decisions. In some instances, a special site selection committee composed of qualified local citizens, the architect, the site planner, and members of the school board may be formed. I guess what I'm saying is if we could expand, if there's time, for the site committee to maybe bring in some local people who are more aware of the standards that need to be considered to make the proper site selection. So all I'm saying is you guys are doing a great job. There's so much work that needs to be done, and you guys, do it day in and day out. So thank you for that, but also thanks for being aware of our needs as a community, your needs. We're all together in this, so let's see it through. That's
All right,
all.
thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Betsy Donovan. I'm 28 Willow Street resident. I also work for the Environmental Protection Agency. I used to work at New York City Department of Environmental Protection. I've been involved in environmental review process for most of my career. And I wondered, I heard mention of SEEKR tonight. That's a state environmental quality review. I'd like to know a little more about what you've done in that regard and where those documents are for us to review.
They're still in progress.
And when will we get a chance to review them? Before the bond?
Yeah, I mean, the board will have to adopt a SEEKR resolution before we can even put the project up for vote.
Do you have a timeline for that?
I would say it's in the next couple of weeks also, because it's.
Will we be informed of that?
Yeah.
It'll be on the agenda.
Yeah.
On the agenda, it's a public process. I think
Yes.
the community and the
Yes.
public should know.
Right, I don't see why.
Be informed for the vote.
Right, so again, we have the board briefs email, which talks about our meetings, and so that's a way to track it. But I think we have on our homepage of the website a timeline, and I think as certain aspects are defined, we'll add that to the timeline.
I think it's an important part of this whole bond project, and I'd like to see it in the public view. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Della Lenz. I want to thank everybody for all the hard work that they've done. I just want to ask again if more information could be put to the public. I know that there's a lot of presentations and a lot of final documents, but the only thing that I could find is really vague and without much detail. I know that I've brought it up before, but like the SEEKA, I would be interested to know what that process is, what is the considerations of it. I think that most people in this community want to make an educated vote. We appreciate all the work that goes into your efforts and all the efforts of all the other volunteers, and maybe show that effort by putting all the documents on board docs or someplace that we can see, like the other locations that you considered. What were the pros, what were the cons, so that everybody's just not calling you with the same question. Put all that information of all the processes right online. I think that the garage has raised a lot of issues, but I know that I had brought it up at the last meeting. Some of the things that I don't know if the community is aware of, and I know with the Go Gray for a Day, I didn't realize until I was out in the library that our book selection is going down. And I'm not sure if the community is aware that, or at what point the decision was made. I know that y'all mentioned it at the last meeting that I attended, that the initiative was to go more digital. And I'm not sure if the community is that the direction that the community wants to go on? I know that with all the awareness for Go Gray for a Day and the concern about the screen time, is that somewhere that is that where the community wants to go? I brought up about the security issues. Just if you could provide more detail on what the considerations were. What are the specs? What were the considerations? What were the details that went into your decision process? What documents did you use to assess this? If you could provide that to the public, we could educate ourselves before we're bombarding you with emails and phone calls. And one other consideration, and I know that it's hard to maintain the facilities within the budget, but I ask again, if we could provide more information about the budget process, and if we could put more emphasis, the state of New York mandates a 5-year facility plan to maintain our facilities and to avoid going out for bond. There are things that you do go out for bond for, but it's not supposed to be regular maintenance, which I see in this bond, and I saw in the last Fields bonds, and I know that I had spoke to board members during the last bond also. And I think part of the focus in this bond process is maybe putting more money into maintaining our facilities. I know working on the budget task force, we have, we've recommended to a previous board with previous administrators to maintain our facilities because that would actually save us money in the long run. Just some things to consider. I know I'm repeating myself, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lenz. Certainly, I think there's a commitment to update our FAQ or Q&A that's available on the website with some of the information that you were talking about. I think, Deb, you had mentioned on Saturday that we would be working on providing some of the details of other areas that have been considered and the pros and cons, as you suggest. And certainly, I personally sympathize with you in terms of what we can spend annually, but similar to early world language or a social worker or any other type of role, we have limited money and it's very incremental from year to year. So some of the long range planning that we're trying to do now hopefully helps us to try and balance that to the best that we can, because it's a difficult challenge we face each year. So thank you. Okay. If we are ready, we will move on to our budget presentation, which, similar to our bond presentation, is a ongoing process, and we will be looking to ask the community to vote on our budget on May 21st as well. As we've been hearing, there are a lot of different aspects that we have to look at, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Harrison and Ms. Stein to lead us in starting that process with a look at our operations and finance tonight.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hanna, and everyone. Please bear with me a second as we get situated. And to Ms. Bernstein, your shout out for world language before was certainly heard, and we have listened. But unfortunately, you're not going to hear about it tonight. Tonight's focus is in and around the topic of not only looking at our budgetary climate, so when we think about the conditions that we face in the public sector, and in particular in public education, but then our focus is pretty squarely on operations and finance. So when Mr. Hanna talks about the items that we look to include in a budget to be able to support student programs, we are looking at areas in and around world language, the idea of social emotional learning and other program development opportunities. But really sitting at the foundation of that is operations and finance. And because we have to have the foundation and we have to have the facilities to be able to support that sort of operation. When we look to our vision and we're looking to the future of our school district, I would love to be able to take credit for the words that are before you on the screen. But I point to fine board president, who actually shared these thoughts just before our budgetary process last year. And thinking about not only what our vision is, but what we need to do to make sure that we have an ever stronger district. So let that sit with you for a second. Ever stronger district. So it's just not here today. It's what is going to be here for tomorrow. It's what's going to be here to support students for generations to come, just like the capital project is designed to do. So when we think about that, we're thinking about academics. We're thinking about social emotional well-being and growth and continually growing and improving programs. We want to think about our facilities. As was referenced in our capital project presentations and will be highlighted again this evening, our district does contribute money and dedicate money each and every year to maintenance and repair in our schools. And that has been an ongoing commitment, and one that Mr. Knowles has led and business officials before Ms. Stein have been committed to. But when we think about that, we're not just thinking about maintenance, we're thinking about security. We're thinking about the protocols that will be in place to make sure our students and staff are in a safe environment. Our last budgetary process had focal points here. This one will have new items that we need to focus on as well. We want to make sure that there's access and support for our faculty through high-quality professional development and fair employment contracts. We need to have an eye on fiscal health. Before Mr. Hanna referenced long-range planning. Certainly would encourage community members to dial back the hands of time and go check out prior board meetings this fall when the administration delivered a long-range plan presentation that was multifaceted. Of course, there was dialogue about finance, which tonight is about, but there was also looking at our needs long-range and where we're going for program and for staff needs in our school district, for student needs and the like. But when we do all this, our eye is to the fiscal health of the school district. We want to make sure that our finances are going to be sustainable. We want to keep an eye on tax cap and have budgets that are consistently compliant with those regulations. Occasionally, as referenced here, tax-neutral capital bonds, no new taxes. The conversation in reference to our capital project once again. But we need to be able to sustain those occasional challenges at service by looking at our expenses, making sure we have strong reserves for when we have an issue and we have to draw upon them. If that's a boiler that breaks down mid-year or other unforeseen challenges, we have to be prepared to be able to be flexible, to pivot and adapt. So that is our focus here. And we do all this while keeping our eye on the tax rate, and the tax rate being what that effect is on the typical homeowner here in our school community. So when we think of that vision, well, that vision just doesn't exist in the air. We have a strategic plan that is posted on our district website, and we've had numerous presentations that certainly relate to it and have targeted that. So when you think of the work that happens across our school district, workshops that occur in this very room with the Board of Education, bless you.
Thank you.
We consistently come back to a series of 6 objectives, which really ground all of our work. And when we come forward with budgetary presentations, such as you'll see tonight, those that you'll see on March 5th related to curriculum and instruction, you're going to see the correlation between these objectives and the recommendations that the administration is going to put forth, and then really to think of the challenge that the board has in making those big decisions and thinking where these priorities lie and where those impacts are and where we are making connections with our objectives. So in doing so, there's alignment that happens, right? So we have to step back and we have to think about where we're going. We have to think about how we're planning for the future. We have to think about the finances and that connection, as I said, with the objectives. And then, as I said before, we got to be prepared for challenges that can surface and be able to make sure that even when those challenges are there, that the district, the board, is consistently targeting those objectives that we hold. So I've used the word challenge, I think, 3 times this evening, and there's countless challenges that exist. We certainly reflect on your own life, and you think about how legislation comes down and impacts your personal budgets. You think about your own finances, what's happening environmentally. Mr. Hanna referenced SALT before, and that assault on the taxpayers in our community, in the broader area. Things like that that are in the national landscape, things that happen on the state landscape, really come home to roost in a school district where our operating budget really connects with our stakeholders and our taxpayers. So when we think about federal government, you can name the story. You can talk about the narrative that has come from DC over recent years. But we also have to be real and think about the mandates that come down from Albany that we have a requirement to address. So just recently, in the past 2 years, there's been a requirement to expand K-12 guidance. So I'm going to stand here as your superintendent. I looked at Dr. Kors, our assistant superintendent for instruction. Neither of us are going to argue the importance of ensuring that we have adequate resources, excuse me, to be able to support our students and the staff to be able to collaborate with our faculty to provide for the well-being of our children. The challenge herein is, where does the money come from? It's not coming from Albany. It's not coming from Washington, D.C. We think of our ENL population, that's English as a new language. Standards have changed in recent years. It's required the school district to employ more staff. Yes, absolutely for the good of the students, but there's been no additional funding to be able to support that. S is the new federal education laws, and there's going to be lots of trickle-down effects that really are going to affect our school district. Ms. Stein is going to talk a little bit about state aid uncertainty and foundation aid, and we'll be able to illustrate some of these points in future slides.
So, foundation aid, which we're going to get to in the next slide, is formula-based, but the formula isn't running, so we'll talk about that in a minute. The other concern that I have this year for the budget, and we're still getting information on this, but the governor's proposal is to lump all kinds of expense-based aids now, and just basically say, okay, whatever number you had next year, that'll be your number going forward with the CPI increase. And that's a little bit dangerous, especially for a district that's not getting foundation aid like we are. So for a district that's relying on these expense-based aid, and when we spend that money with BOCES for a high-cost student, for transportation, and then not to get that money back is really going to be detrimental to us. So in terms of advocacy, in terms of keeping a watch on this, we need to be really careful that this does not go through. So there'll be a lot of lobbying against it, but we need to be on the forefront of that as well, because that could hurt us.
And just if I can speak to BOCES, the concept of the cooperatives that exist across the state of New York, the focus, the foundation of that work that exists within BOCES is the concept of economies of scale, the concept of shared service. So we have numerous agreements through our local and regional BOCES, and by doing that and joining that, we receive aid back from the state. So we are reaching out, we're joining consortiums, we're collaborating with other agencies, other school districts to reduce our expenditures, but in doing so, as Carol indicated, the governor's proposing capping any kinds of increases, regardless of the level of initiative that this Board of Education or administration may demonstrate to dig deeper into those economies of scales, to dig deeper into shared services. They're saying, that's great, go ahead and do it. We've built these structures to be able to support you, but by the way, you're not going to have the big picture benefits that have been promised for decades across the state of New York.
We'll also just talk quickly about the tax cap. There's legislation to make that permanent. And while, that might be, in some people's view, a good thing, and, I won't offer an opinion on that, I do think that if they were to do that, they need to do that with a change in the formula. And the key thing that I think we need is for them to fix the carryover provision. So if you have a year where you have a very high growth factor and good CPI, and you actually have funds available to you, but maybe you don't want to spend it on that year because you know that the following year you're going to have a larger need, okay? So maybe, for example, you had a very high growth factor this year and pension rates are coming down. But then next year they're going to go back up. Maybe I want to hold some of that back for the following year. Well, right now we can't do that. If we don't use our levy this year, our levy base will go down for the following year, and you cannot carry it over. I think the intention was for it to do it, but the way they ran this formula, it doesn't do it. There's too much fine print, and you can't do it. So if we are going to lobby again, that would be something to fix, because then the tax cap formula would give us, again, control and allow us to run our district. So when I presented the long-range plan, I think I pointed out to you that it's impossible to do a long-range plan when you don't know your largest source of revenue, and that's your tax cap. So it's, you can make assumptions all you want. I think the other piece of advocacy would be to say it should always be 2%. If CPI is higher, then go higher. But it should never be lower than that. There's just basic, basic need for that. So if they were to fix the formula, that would be another thing I would advocate for.
I just say I'm having lots of concern for our Board of Education. You're not sounding too well tonight, folks, so I hope you hang in there, and we will move along efficiently this evening so that you can get home and do well, but this is important stuff. You know, when we think about tax tertiaries, we certainly understand and respect the process, and for any entity, whether it be a corporation or a private homeowner, to be able to challenge their taxes. But what the difficulty is for a school district is that when the refunds are to be granted and we go through that respective legal process, the burden really hits the school district hard. And when we think of a small community like Irvington, I invite you to drive Terrytown up 119 White Plains Road and think of all those office parks and all those big office buildings. Those are in our school district. So when those companies, those corporations come forward and seek to have their taxes adjusted, it's your tax dollars that have to fund those payments. And that's very difficult. When we think of our agendas on a regular basis, there are tax settlements. We work hard with our legal team to be able to fight them, to make sure they're at a responsible, reasonable, fair level for the taxpayers of Irvington. But I have to tell you, this is something that's unpredictable and hits our bottom line very, very hard here in Irvington. Changes in enrollment is another area that can have real impacts. And I can say that while demographers going back years ago were looking at dips in enrollment here in Irvington, I've been here for 7 years and we've looked at level enrollment, which is great, right, from a budgeting standpoint. But where challenges come in is we don't know the needs of students that are going to surface in our community. So whether that are the children that are currently in our roles or students that may come to the Irvington schools down the road that may have some special needs that we need to tend to. And in many cases, that results in additional funds and funds that we are committed to providing to make sure that we provide for the optimal learning experience for every single child. So we're just not focused on children that are sitting in an AP class or any other honors program or a Regents level class. We're thinking about every child every day in our schools. And then finally, looking at contractual obligations, some of which are beyond our control. Pension contributions, that's dictated to us by New York State. When we look at health insurance costs, certainly there are terms that we negotiate with our employee groups, but outside of that, the rates that we see from year to year are based upon the experiences of the overall group that we're a part of. So there's lots of challenges that are embedded here. Utility costs are always in flux. I have to say, every time we get an email from one of the utilities, I get a bit of a cold sweat. But there's just countless challenges that are before us. But when we think of all those challenges and we think of where we are, foundation aid is something that really stands out. So we can look at this history that carries on for a number of years. When we look at foundation aid, which are the rules of how schools are to be funded in New York State. If that formula was to be totally funded and truly funded, you can see the monies that would have come to Irvington. So when we look over the course of these years from 2008, 9 to the present year, we're owed $10 million. $10 million. So when we think of the operation of this school district, when we think of where that burden lies, it lies with the local taxpayers here. We recognize that the tax dollars that are raised from Lower Hudson Valley, Long Island, 80% of those dollars go elsewhere across the state. And we're certainly not saying that we aren't in this together, that we aren't one broad New York community. But what's a challenge is to step back to think about where your money is going and how money that is supposed to come back to the Irvington Union Free School District is not here today, to the tune of $10 million. So, where have we been? You know, we talked about challenges before. Fourth time I'm using the word, I believe. And in doing so, there were difficult times. We go back to the recession and we think about the challenges for the fifth time that the school district faced. The Board of Education and Administration had to make some decisions. How are we going to respond to the challenges that were being faced in our broader community, the fiscal woes that were before us? And during those years, there were numerous cuts across our school district. Cuts in personnel. When we talk about cuts in personnel, let's be honest, that translates to students and student experiences. And in doing so, you can see the numbers. I'm not going to read them all to you, but nearly 20 teaching positions, additional staff greater than 15, electives that were reduced, student programs, so on and so forth. And then in 2013-14, this community stood up and said enough is enough. We pivoted. The community came together and we overrode the tax levy cap. And in doing so, really sought to restore our faith in the school community, restore and renew our commitment to our children and to their future, and to the future of our schools, and in turn the future of our community. And in doing so, we were motivated not just to simply restore programs, to think, hey, one was cut here, another was cut there, but to think about where those smart investments were to grow student experiences, to provide support structures, to be able to support students. And in doing so, since that point in time, the district has remained at or below that tax levy cap. Our enrollment has remained steady, as we said before, with little tweaks here and there. But as we look to move forward, this is a district that invests in its students. This is a district that invests in its community and our faculty and staff. And this is a path that this budget will keep us on. So when we think about where we've been, recent budget history, you can see a bit of a general overview of our general fund expenditures, and really broken into the individual categories, those large areas in which money is categorized. And you can see the trends of that spending as it's fluxed throughout different years, whether it's been facilities and our continued investment in facilities. When we think about the focus of regular education, special education, the cost of benefits, you can see that number growing as time moves on. So here really is the story of where we've been and trends that we may follow moving forward. So trends, looking at it through a different lens, as referenced before, that idea of where we've been, looking at increases that existed from year to year as a percent budget increase, and then also looking at the tax levy increase. The one thing that's always important to note is when we come down and we look at that 17-18 school year, really we're setting a new benchmark for ourselves, right? Drawing a new line because of the reevaluation that occurred in the community. So as we look to move forward, that is the foundation from which we measure ourselves, because those other numbers don't have direct correlations.
One of the things that's always asked of us is, what about fund balance and how does that relate to the budget? So a budget is a plan, and we're making that plan now. It's halfway through this year, and we haven't even gotten to next year. So we're making a plan almost, a year in advance, or six to 9 months in advance. So things will not obviously come exactly as we budgeted. What happens when we either spend less than we budgeted, in terms of that? So what happens is that money is not lost. It goes back to the community in the form of fund balance. So we're allowed to keep, according to the state, 4% in what's called an undesignated reserve, fund balance reserve. That's actually a pretty low number. Another thing that we're advocating for in terms of business officials to raise that to at least 6%. I mean, I don't know what business would keep only 4%. Moody's would actually say that's incredibly low, and rates on bonds because of that. They would rate us higher if we had higher fund balance. But at least it's something to keep in our arsenal, I guess you want to say, for things that we do need. We would be able to access that if we had an emergency, if we needed it. Say something really drastic happened in the school, we could then use that money. We also use that money to make sure that we have enough money to cover our expenses from July through October. We do not get our tax revenue until October. So we have to cover payroll and ongoing expenses in that period of time. The funny thing about it is if you don't maintain the 4%, then you are considered in fiscal stress by the government. So they want you to keep 4% and only 4%, which is a very exact number, which is an interesting thing. So we use it for that. We use it to make sure we have some level of reserves, and that's basically our responsible thing. So when money does, expenditures are less than revenues, which is hopefully the case, the money does go into fund balance.
So that said, I thought it was an appropriate time to stop and remind the Board of Education where we are in the process. So tonight, we're talking about the operations and finance component of our budget. On March 5th, we're talking about curriculum and instruction as referenced before. Those two pieces come together. So when we think of the board's work, there's certain responsibilities to keep in mind as we go through the rest of the presentation tonight, and understand that what is presented tonight is not the final say. It's not a final recommendation. But what it is a part of a process that through the feedback and discussion this evening, importantly, the feedback and discussion associated with the March 5th presentation, will then inform the proposed budget that I'll present on March 19th. So in doing so, there's lots of process here. There's opportunities for engagement from the community as discussed along the way. April 2nd is just a work session. It's like, hey, we've heard 3 rounds of budget, right? We've talked about operations and finance. We've heard priorities. We're thinking about as a board where we want to go. What's that budgetary ceiling? What is responsible growth? I'm going to use that word responsible. I want to underscore that. Growth for our school community. What are we thinking about as far as a fund balance, appropriation? And are the presentations that you've heard sustainable for our fiscal future? So when you think of all those things, we work through process, right? 3 budget presentations and discussions referenced, and then we dig in on the second. And on the second, we're talking about where do we want to land. And that feedback is processed, and we come to a level of agreement and priority about where we're going to come forward with a presentation where a budget is adopted on the 23rd. And of course, we ask for and appreciate all the levels of engagement that were referenced when we talked about our other process. So that said, here we go. So I'm going to bring us back to our strategic plan. And when we think of the strategic plan, I said there were 6 objectives before, trustees. And in doing so, we could probably find that thread that weaves from every single one of these objectives to every line within this budget. But when we think of those that stand out, those are highlighted in red, or some more obvious connections for us that we're going to highlight tonight. And any considerations, and when I say considerations for the board and for the community, when you think of that as asks, think of that as budgetary requests or considerations for what we may include in that proposed budget. We're going to make these connections because this is the foundation of our work. These are the beliefs that we hold as a school district. So that said, even though that there is that linkage, there is that overarching objective which speaks to the fiscal health of the school district and providing that high quality learning environment. That's the foundation of all that we're talking about today. So as we move forward, we're going to talk about a variety of categories that Carol's going to explain now, and then we're going to jump into the recommendations and the related finance.
Okay, so as Dr. Harrison mentioned, this is the operations and portion of the budget. So it's not directly related to the construction, curriculum and instruction. Construction, it's on my mind. I wonder why. But certainly all of these areas have an impact on instruction. So these are like the things that support the area. So we have our Board of Education, our Office of the District Office for the Superintendent, my office, which has basically all of the operational pieces that go into support. We have our legal, our human resources, the public information, how we communicate with you, central printing and mailing. We have a lot of requirements on what we have to provide to you in terms of budget notices and the like that. Certainly, the facilities and operations budget, which we'll spend quite a bit of time on tonight. We have what's called central data processing. So there's 2 pieces of technology. One is in this part of the budget, and one is an instructional part. This is the infrastructure part that goes for the network, things like that. We have special items, insurance, our BOCES admin costs, certain taxes and tax certiorari refunds that we put into this part of the budget. Transportation, debt service, which is the payment for all of our prior borrowing, and transfers to other funds. I'll explain some of them more in detail when we get to each category. So when you look at how much of this part of the budget it makes up, it's not as big of the instruction and curriculum, and that's how it should be. So 77% is the rest of it, and we're talking about the remaining part tonight. And at this point, when I'm looking at how much what I'm proposing adds up, it's about $14 million, a little over $14 million. And as we talked about before, there's a lot of key cost drivers that happen every year. Salaries is obviously the biggest piece of it because that's the largest part of our budget. So without even doing anything, what we call our push-ahead budget, you're going to see salary increases based on our contracts or proposed contracts. Facilities needs, every year we look at equipment needs from zero, I call that zero-based budgeting. We start from zero on equipment and we look at what we need. But you also have ongoing maintenance. There we have certain things we must do every year and then other things that we want to do. BOCES, we'll talk about it. We got an informational document about what their cost of increases are going to be. We also get charged an administrative piece, which covers their overhead. And that number has been rising because in the past couple of years, we've had to pay the portion of retiree health for their employees. They used to be able to keep a reserve, and they're no longer able to do that. So we have an increased share there in the last couple of years for that. Technology infrastructure I just talked about. We have needs for our network. Special education, these are cost drivers for the entire budget. I just kind of put them here as part of the landscape picture again. Special education tuitions are always changing depending on the student population. Insurance costs happen with workers' comp, with health insurance, with other areas. We have a real risk this year with our transportation contract because I don't know if everyone's aware, but there is a national bus driver shortage going on. And that is really making it difficult for bus companies to hire drivers and then also maintain some of the contracts that they've had with us. So they are looking to constantly renegotiate the contracts they have. And so where it used to have a 1 year, a bid that would go 5 years, they would just keep renewing it. They're not so apt to renew bids right now. So we always have this risk that they're going to go out to bid again. And then debt service is our actual, numbers. So now we break it down. These are actually, you want to do this one?
This is where the fun begins. So when we think of the new considerations, right, this is the initiative. And this is where we're thinking not just the rollover and thinking of salaries and the push-ahead budget. It's not just thinking of the zero-based budgeting. These are the new initiatives that we are really committed to. Through communication with our faculty and staff, we're really committed to the safety and security in our schools. So going back a few years ago, we added security guards to our budget, and we expanded our security staff to add roving guards here on the school campus. And much of our capital project is tied to safety and security for all of our schools. But one thing that we recognize is that our security staff essentially works student hours. But I can tell you there is not one single teacher that works student hours. Our teachers work long days, whether it's in their classrooms planning, whether it's supervising, advising, coaching, leading student activities. Our teachers are here for an extended day. When we also think about our students in those programs, their participation in those programs, we want to be able to provide security. So we want to extend our security hours. And in doing so, we've come up with a methodology that across our schools, we're going to look to expand the hours of coverage for our security guards to have more afternoon and evening support. And you can see that comes at a cost of over $76,000. So we keep talking about safety and security, and in doing so, there's lots of important work that goes on. There's work that's happened historically across the school district related to planning and training. But I can say that we've taken a real step forward. We've pivoted in the last couple of years. And we've really upped the ante on the level of safety and security and our commitment to it and our preparation for any kind of emergency situation that arises. So here we're actually looking to bring in expertise. Expertise that is going to guide, plan, inform, and provide training on an ongoing basis for all of our faculty and staff. And in doing so, we are committed to be able to provide more secure, better prepared school environments for our faculty, staff, and students. And in doing so, we know that it's going to provide a more high-quality learning experience with folks that are more focused on learning because they know they're going to be in a safer environment. We know that there's going to be strengthened connections to our schools because folks are going to feel more secure in that environment. But when we look at this $69,000, just don't think it as a straight salary. We're actually looking at a shared service on 2 different tiers. First being a partnership with a neighboring school district, a school district that is actually going to share this expense with us. So when you see $69,000, a part of that is half of the actual security service that would be here on school grounds, that would be here a few days a week, that is going to be evaluating our security systems, supervising our security staff, planning future drills, helping increase our readiness for emergencies. But that cost is split. But it also includes the administrative fees that Carol referenced before. So when we look at that $69,000, that's cost year 1. But year 2, we get BOCES aid that comes back from the state of New York. So Carol, when we think of this, a good chunk of this will then come back as aid in future years. And then finally, another recommendation is a new phone system. To say we have an archaic phone system in our school district. Just this morning, talking to one of my superintendent colleagues, was talking about all the great advancements they have with their phone systems and how they're actually resources in the classroom. It's just not communication that when a trustee needs to call and talk to the superintendent or one of the assistant superintendents, they are tools to support learning. And in doing so, we need to upgrade our system, but I have to be honest. Our system is fragile. Our system is dated. That you can see on the slide, it references that idea of the fact that our system runs on a platform that is 19 years old, a system that's no longer supported. So if something breaks, we're actually on the market for secondhand parts. So what we're looking at here is the installation this summer of a completely new phone system. A phone system that we would be looking to purchase through a lease installment that would be $60,000 a year over the course of 5 years. In doing so, though, we would have a full new phone system in our buildings now that would enhance communication, serve as a learning resource in our classrooms, but also will enhance communication internally for case of emergencies. We'll actually look to expand upon the traditional infrastructure of a PA, public address type system as well.
Next 2 are, you'll have a little more detail when we get to the facilities part of the budget, but we are looking to add a floating custodian that would relieve us when there's custodians out, which is basically almost every day. There's somebody out because of vacation and leave and sick time, things like that. So we'll talk about it a little bit more when I get to that slide. And also, we have a need to replace a pickup truck, and we would like to add a maintenance van. So right now, we have 2 maintenance workers who either borrow a pickup truck that might be in use to go get supplies when they need to, or they drive around in their own personal vehicle with Irvington supplies all the time, and it's really not an ideal situation for us. It's not suited for that. So that's the request. We'll get to a little bit more again. So now I start to put it all together, and as you know, I've been doing this by function code because that's one of the ways we are obligated to build our budget is by function code. And for anyone who's not aware of it, these function codes are dictated to us, and that's called the Uniform System of Accounts that we work with in the State Education Department. So there's no real change in the Board of Education, District Clerk, District Meeting, and even really the Office of Chief School Administrator. So there's really nothing much to talk about here. These are just push-ahead numbers that are going forward. When we get to the next slide, that is the business areas that I had mentioned. Includes my office, the payroll, purchasing, auditing, treasurer, all these areas. And again, just salary increases that are contractual at this point. We did have a variance in our treasurer's salary because we had hired our previous treasurer. We had an issue with trying to get treasurers because we were paying too low, and now we're finally getting closer to where we need to be on that. The second area is legal. Again, I put all these together: legal, human resources, public information, messenger, and these are very small areas. I have on our website the detail that goes behind all this, or anyone who's interested in that. If you go on the website, there's a detailed budget pages that go with this. So I don't send it all out on here because it's just so much to put on the slides. But if you want to know what piece is salary behind this, what piece is other expense, what piece is supplies, and what piece is BOCES. That detail is there for you on our website. It's called budget backup or something like that, budget detail.
Is that a typo? New considerations, none?
New considerations, none.
Because there was a slide up above that said summary of new considerations.
It's for consistency.
Yeah, so on every slide, if there is a new consideration
Oh, it's
that
each
goes,
slide, I got you.
that goes
Got you.
with that
Thank you.
particular area,
Got it.
I would
Got
put
it.
it here just so that
Got it.
you can put it in perspective as to where that would go in the budget. Good question, Dave, thank you. Okay, so then we go on to the next one. So now we're going to get into the facilities area, and this is, a little bit of a larger dollar amount in this area, so we'll spend a little bit more time here. And I start by putting it all together for you, but I really almost think it's easier to go in the parts and then come back to this slide. So here we have on our push-ahead variances, we do have some increases in our contractual costs. We've had quite a bit of repairs with our HVAC and our boiler maintenance, with plumbing. That's one of the areas we've seen an increase in, and vehicle maintenance, and of course salaries. We're going to be talking about the additional custodial positions, security guard. The security guards fall into this budget. It could really maybe fall into a different area, but we've always been putting it into our facilities budget. The shared service security coordinator, Dr. Harrison talked about, and the facility vehicles. So I break it down, and what we do with facilities is a lot of this budget is zero-based budgeted. So, in many cases, you're just doing a carryover and saying, I have this existing and I'm going to keep it. But with facilities, we really look at it. Gary and I start in October, November, and we really go through what does next year look like. And we take a look at what equipment we need, because you're not going to buy the same equipment you bought last year, so that's why we start from scratch on equipment. And the same thing with capital repair and building repair projects. So Gary will meet with the principals. He'll go through and have all these discussions. What do they want? What do they need? What is he seeing? What does his head custodians have told him that they need? And this all informs the work that we are proposing today. We don't get to everything. Some things will stay on a list, and we keep them, and then we kind of look at priority levels and try to see what's reasonable to include. But we don't lose track of them. We keep them from year to year. So and one of the things I'll push back on is if something's been on the list for a couple of years, I'll say, okay, when are we going to address that? You can't just keep kicking that down the can, so down the road. So let's go on to the next one. So for facilities equipment this year, we're looking to add an auto scrubber. I mentioned the van for the maintenance mechanics. A pickup truck, right now our pickup truck is the one we're looking to replace is how many years old, Gary? 2007? 9. And it's costing us a lot to repair that vehicle. So that's one of the ones we're not sure that it will make another year. A burnisher for floors. A disinfectant sprayer, that's something we're looking to add. We obviously use disinfectant in all our rooms, but this is a kind of a spray that can really just do an entire room. It can fumigate an entire room really quickly. So if one particular class, if the nurse tells us we've had a high incidence of absenteeism in one room, we can just quickly really just spray that room down and make it the next day perfect. And it doesn't leave a residue. Everything we use for people in the audience is approved by the state and doesn't have any chemicals we're not allowed to use.
So you could use it right here in the boardroom
I could use it
now.
right here, and that might be a good thing to do at this point. if we had one, if we owned that right now. But
Perhaps
we do
last week
disinfect
with
the best we can. We're looking to add a washer and dryer, and sometimes some of these things will actually save us money because they might save us time. Right now, we have to buy rags to clean, and if we had a better washer dryer system, we could actually recycle and reuse a lot of our own rags, so we're not constantly buying new ones. And we need to add another lawnmower and snow blower. So those are the types of equipment that we're looking to do. One of the things that we've talked about within the capital project presentation is air conditioning for classrooms. So we've been adding over the years room air conditioners. Usually they're because of a student IEP or a teacher need from a health perspective. And so now we're basically formalizing our plan for the next couple of years to get us to that 100% that I talked about in the capital project. And if I look at the remaining amount, and this is basically taking 1/3 of the remaining amount for most of the schools at this point. Now, it could be that we could get to more if the electrical needs aren't as high. So what we include in this is not just the cost of the unit, it's the cost of wiring in the unit. And if you think about it, you can't just take a unit and put it there if you don't have the load to put it. So sometimes you have to run a different outlet. You might have to run an extra hookup to your actual fuse box, whatever you want to call it. There's obviously a better word for that, circuit. So sometimes we have more extensive needs than others, but If we can get to more, we will, depending on the cost. We have a certain amount per unit there. So that is the plan. Hopefully we could get there within 3 years. I'm optimistic we might be able to do it even a little bit sooner, but I don't want to publicly go on record saying that, so.
And then I would just add to this is, as Carol referenced the capital project, in the capital project, we are also budgeting for the air conditioning of gymnasium in the school. We can provide for a large space that can be cooled, so children can go through them on a daily basis, whether it's a part of PE or other school-based experiences. So this would be supplemental to that.
So for our capital repair projects, we are looking to repair a catch basin at Dow's Lane. We have exterior side doors at Main Street School that are, they're very old now, and if you push on it too much, they could give, and that's a safety issue. Rain gutters at the campus has been on our list for a couple of years now, and we've now moved it up into the top priority to address that. There's a piece of the walkway that leads from Broadway to the high school that we want to repair. This would not be something that we would be doing in the site work, or that would be then redone in the capital project. So we're looking at things that would not be addressed in the future project. We have a roof drain that we need to fix, some floor tile in the theater gym building. That tile that when you first walk in from the area by the middle school toward the main lobby is really in bad shape. And we are in the process of doing a theater inspection this year, and that will we know that will lead to several needs for repairs that they will point out for us. So that's putting aside some money for that. In terms of at Dow's Lane, we're looking to replace some window screens and some wall tile in the old wing. We're replacing some bathroom partitions. There's been a large request for water fountains. In Dow's Lane, some of the water fountains are not cold. They just are water. And when it's a hot day, there's no refrigerated tank underneath that makes that water cold. And that surfaces a problem. Where we can, we're going to be looking to either add refrigeration, and wherever we can, when we talk about fountains, we're adding the bottle filling stations. Sometimes you can't, though, if extensive plumbing is needed. So wherever we can, we'll be looking to do that. And then we have painting of 7 classrooms at Dow's. At Main Street, we have some ongoing corkboard and whiteboard repairs. We're replacing some worn carpet. We have to add padding on our basketball court posts. The rear stage curtain is in need of repair. We're going to be looking to add an ice maker at Main Street School, and this is kind of also a piloting type thing, which would then, again, support their recycling initiative at that school. They would like to make sure that they limit the use of water bottles at that school. The children at that school are very into the recycling. That's, I guess, the perfect age for them to really get into this. And so they want to have an ice maker so they can bring jugs of water out and have kids bring their own bottles. And so we're going to support that by letting them have an ice maker if the budget can provide for that. And then the painting projects there are the ground floor corridor and 2 of the classrooms.
So the one thing that I do want to note as we transition to the next slide, when you see there's day-to-day things, right, that we're taking into there's some bigger picture things that we look to, but the bottom line is we're supporting the infrastructure, right? The idea of painting, if you go back each and every year, you see routine painting. Each building has a focus that's tied to painting to ensure that we're keeping spaces clean and fresh to promote a positive learning environment for our students and faculty.
At the campus, we'll be looking to replace some failing ceiling fans that we have at the middle school and replace some soffits. Again, we're talking about adding a bottle filling station in the cafeteria music science building, whiteboard repairs that we would have to do. And here we'll be painting the 2 of the wing corridors and also the guidance conference room. So now there are a couple of projects we weren't able to include this year unless, things change in terms of our quotes, but there are some bottle filling station requests that we just don't think we can do because it would require major plumbing. I'll give you an example. In the Dow's cafeteria, the principal would like to have one in the Dow's cafeteria. We just don't see how we could do that right now, given the way the plumbing is. It's something we're going to look at again and continue to work with our architect on options. Certain glass we would look to replace, but a lot of that we're also going to be looking to do that as part of our capital project with the safety film. And classroom casework that always comes up from the principals every year. They want to improve how their storage is in their rooms. It's very expensive to do it. The home and careers classroom wants to add a washer and dryer in the room itself, but there would be a lot of changes in that room that would be needed in order to do that. So that's something that we need more time to be able to work architecturally to figure that out, if it's even possible. And as Dr. Harrison mentioned, we have a list of painting projects, so what we do is phase some every year, and we keep the rest on the list, and we just keep going, so that every year we're allocating dollars toward painting.
Just that point that, certainly things in under provides Gary the flexibility to address some other projects as we move forward each year.
And then usually I inform the board what we have not included on the capital projects. These would have been things that we would consider, either because they cost too much, or we just don't feel like we have to do it at this point. And the things I've asked for us are all things we've included in the capital project, and you heard last week, so I'm not going to go through that. The other things that's on our list always is to restore that bell tower at Main Street School, which we just don't seem like we can allocate funds to yet. And there's also a coal chute that we need to, at some point, seal off there. It's not urgent, but it's something we want to just keep our minds on. So the floating custodian, the idea for this is that, we have 27 custodians. When our custodians are not there, the work is still there. Just like when we hire a substitute teacher, the work is still there. So the idea would be to maintain the consistency in operations by having, a designated custodian who would then float in the buildings. And when I did the analysis, I looked at how many days of the month we have a perfect attendance, like we have all 27 custodians there, and it's generally maybe only 10 days in a month, not even, some days it's less, because they all have vacation. And unlike the rest of our staff, they don't get vacation for our holiday periods. They work those periods. They work snow days. These are days that they work, so they have to take their time off on other days. And so there's always a day when we don't have somebody. And we use substitutes and we use overtime to fill that need, but it would be better for our operations if we could have a floating custodian. And this is an idea that really surfaced from the custodian unit, and I do believe there's value in it. We also have a greater need to have custodians help set us athletic events, which we are running to do. So our custodians cover a lot of ground as it is, and this would just help us. The days that we did have full staff, they would be tackling some of the other things that we have our maintenance workers work on, and then we could get to those projects sooner. So these people would also have a kind of a maintenance piece to them. The total salary and the benefits would be about almost $80,000 when I look at the salary plus benefits, but I would be able to reduce overtime and substitutes by about $20,000. So there is a cost to doing this. So the proposal that we talked about of adding the guards, the idea would be to have guards continue until 5 or 7, depending on the building and what was going on in that, in that day. Maybe Fridays less, but other days more. And we would maybe cover some evening events where we thought we would need the security. We would have to look at this all still. And this was a major concern that was cited by our staff in the security meetings we had last spring. The total cost, as Dr. Harrison mentioned, is $69,000 when we share it with another district, but we would receive 56% back the following year. So when you look at the net cost, it's really only $30,360 if we were to maintain that going forward. So the first year is an increased cost, and then after that it would be only $30,000. So, and again, as you mentioned, this is really to help us coordinate all of the different things that we are required to do. It falls right now to me in my office, and it's just something that I feel like I'm not keeping up with at the moment. I try, but it's one of those things that's just a lot to keep up with. So that's really where we landed with the security, the facilities. The central data processing is the part of the technology that's the network base, that's infrastructure. And here again, we do a zero-based approach to this, and this is the equipment that's been identified as being needed for our network. So we've been generally allocating around $170,000, and while you see a variance of $19,200, that's really not a true variance, because we have installment debt that's coming off, and we'll see that when we get to the debt section. And so that money that's been coming off the debt each year from the previous installment purchases is either going to this part of the technology budget or our instructional technology budget. So it's not really a true variance. I just point that out to you. The BOCES cost is really reflective of the actual price increases. So I think they've seen an increase in with CPI and changes as well. So they're passing that on to us. So these are minor. There's really no variances here. The only one I will talk about is the BOCES admin, which I already spoke about, is the cost of retiree health. So they have to now pay for that as a part of their operating budget. By the way, we do too. We pay for our retiree health as part of our operating budget too. So they just in the past had a larger reserve that they were able to put money toward to offset it, and they're not able to do that anymore. So that's where we're seeing the increase. And they're stepping it up each year until they get to a certain point. Transportation worries me a little bit, again, because of the fact that we may have to go out to bid on some of our contracts. Right now, you'll see some shift in numbers. Every year I'm analyzing again where our transportation costs lie, and we're getting better at actually sorting it, what our in-district costs are versus our private school and special ed costs. We do share on our private schools and special ed, we share rides with Hastings, Ardsley, and Dobbs Ferry. We're looking to add some other school districts if we can that would offset these costs. If we can get more students, like that would be, say, riding to Fordham or riding to Ursuline or some of the places that we have to go that are within our 15-mile limit, if we can get a few more riders on the bus, that lowers the cost for everybody. So we're actively seeking that, especially now when we think this contract might go, again, a little bit higher than we want it to be. I want to point out that the cost for the late bus is in the in-district number. And last year we had proposed to you about a $20,000 increase for it. We were able to actually make the cost of those late buses only around, I think it was $5,000. And the way we were able to do that was by extending the time of the route, the in-district route, and just adding on time on our regular basis contract. So it wasn't a brand new bus that came every day. It was extending an existing route. So the cost was significant savings. The ridership, we've been looking at it, because I know you're interested in that. The ridership has been a little bit lower than we would hope, and I know it's still something that's new, and we're still working on getting the word out. One of the buses has pretty much habitually 5 to 6 students every day, and the other bus that goes south really has only maybe 0 or 1 on any given day. We could go to one bus. The problem with doing that is it would actually cost us about $7,500. It would be somewhere in between, because then that one bus would have to run both north and south, take a little bit longer for everyone to get home, and then we would be extending a little bit more than the hour time that we would be using that bus. So something to think about, whether we could just reduce it to one. I do think that, again, with time and continual promotion, it's worth having for the limited amount of cost it is, and it does allow students that could participate in activities that their parents can't get them home from. So I would advocate to continue using that and continue working to try to improve the ridership.
I'm sorry, I just didn't catch. What's the number of students on the north?
The north one is the one that has usually 5 to 6 students every day.
Okay, thank you.
It's the south one that usually, which is the shorter run of the two, that has usually like 0 or 1, occasionally 2.
Okay, thank you.
So debt service, again, this is where we took a look at all of the payments we have for our borrowings. The installment portion of that is almost this year and next year are our last 2 years for that. And that money would be going back into our technology budget, assuming we follow the same plan we've been doing for the last 3 years, where the expiring debt goes back into technology, since that is what we borrowed that debt for. The transfer to special aid fund, that's to cover summer handicap, or I shouldn't call it summer special ed programs. That's the old word we used to use, I'm sorry. And our obligation is to pay 20% of that cost. The state picks up 80%. And in this governor's proposal, they did not talk about shifting that back to us. Every year they hint on that one. They did not bring it up this year. So at least that's safe for a little while. But that cost is increasing, and again, you never really know what the cost is going to be depending on student placements. It varies every year. But I have seen that we need to increase our budget because we were above it last year. And here's where I put the cost for the new phone system. So that's why you see, Dave, you see the new consideration, you see it here, because it belongs with this budget. So I'm trying to match up where those considerations go in terms of the function codes for you. And we would be looking to lease that over 5 years. I think we might do better than 60,000, but since I don't have, haven't gone out to bid or quote yet with it, I just had some people give me an idea of what it would cost. And that's why I'm picking that number. I'm certain that it's a safe number. It might be a little bit less. Putting it all together, all of the new requests come to $312,000 at this point. I don't know we'll be able to sustain that as we go forward in the process, as Dr. Harrison mentioned. But right now, these are the requests that we're going to consider.
So as Carol indicated, and Dr. Kaur, it is a part of a journey for us as we move from budget to budget. And we're going to be straightforward. We're going to be transparent to say it's going to be a difficult budget year. State aid doesn't help the district much. We know that we have growing costs in some areas, but at the same time, we have our ambition, and our ambition to be able to continue to provide through students. And as you can see, that was directly connected with our strategic objectives. We're highlighting how our facilities and maintenance of the facilities relates directly back to student programs. We are consistently committed to the maintenance of our facilities. We're trying to address a number of infrastructure needs, and certainly those are greatly expanded upon in the capital project. Security is something that I'm very committed to. And when we step back and we look at, discussing, well, what fits and what doesn't fit, I have to say some of these security initiatives, I'm going to tell you right now, feel like non-negotiables for me, because when we think of the day and age that we live in, there's nothing more important than the safety and security of our staff and students. But all of these considerations will remain under consideration as we move forward. They'll be a part of the dialogue over the next 2 months as we look to finalize a budget that we then ultimately bring to the residents of our school community to vote upon. Again, an overview of our process and the conversations that will occur in this room, either through formal presentations and discussion or a workshop model. There will be a number of other budget forums that will take place that will certainly look to answer questions and educate our community on the budget proposal that all leads to the vote on the 21st. And when we say a vote on the 21st, just to be mindful that when we think of the vote on the 21st, we're talking about more than one vote. We're just not talking about a budget. We're not just talking about trustee elections. We're also talking capital project on the same day. So when we think of the 21st, we're thinking about the future of Irvington. So we're thinking about what's going to happen here next year. We're thinking what's going to happen here 10, 15 years down the road. So lots of critical votes will be cast on that day. With that said, Mr. Hanna, trustees, the conversation is now yours.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the work and the clarity that you put into the presentation. It's much appreciated. Nevertheless, there are always questions and thoughts. Is there anyone who's ready to ask some questions? Because I'm happy to start with someone who's ready to go.
Yeah.
Deb?
Let's talk about the phones.
Oh, you? Okay, go ahead, Dave.
Let's talk about the phones.
Do you have a question about the phones?
I said, let's talk about the phones.
Do you have a thought?
I'd like to, I guess I have several questions about the phones. One, what is the system that costs $300,000 over 5 years? Two, what are the said functions of that system? D, what other components? I know it's not just the phone system, but it ties into, the robocalls, or does it? I don't know. I just know, having had to repurchase phone equipment in the school, that seems really, really expensive, and I would love to break that down and figure that out.
I can get you some more information on that. I have some proposals from different vendors that I'm basing this off of. Right now, our voicemail system alone that's the Windows 2000 part. Our phones go out, I would say 2 or 3 times a week right now. They might go out for only a minute or two, sometimes 10 minutes. Sometimes it only goes out in one school. It's dangerous. If we don't have our phones, we can't function. If it were to go out for an extended period of time, we could potentially have to close schools, because you have to have phones. You have to be able to have emergency access. So it's a tough situation right now. And when they go out, it's difficult because we're calling to again, get parts sometimes, and even replacing phones. So I will get you some more information specifically on that.
I think to that point, I guess we'll just stay on it as each one you raise. While it's probably a lot of work, I think we're going to have to, because of the cost in terms of what you're going to provide to us, tells the deficiencies of our program and what we are hoping to achieve, and what are the options out there. I also was curious where that actually appears, like in terms of what we're spending right now, under what category?
So right now, we're not spending anything on phones.
There's
I mean,
no-
the only thing we're spending right now on phones is like when I call the company to come and fix something. So there's a fixing fee right now, but our system is so old, it's been paid off over years. So it's basically, again, like buying a new, brand new car, and you have to finance the car.
Okay. Yeah, and part of also, I guess, what I'd be curious in is how it ties into technology in terms of what else it offers by purchasing a new system.
Yeah, it would be a voice over internet protocol system, and we would be tying that in through our computer system, so it would be through our network.
I can get all the details.
be a lot.
It's a lot of technical knowledge, yeah.
Thank
It
you.
also offers a lot more features than we have right now that, we just don't have. We're not taking advantage of anything modern right now.
I'm sorry, we'll
they
we'll
have-
have an
they-
opportunity for questions a little later.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, great, so we're looking to get some more detailed information related to that.
That was my biggest question. I'm sure other people will repeat some of the other ones.
All right. Anyone else want to jump in?
I know that when we've talked about the capital budget, we're always talking about the fact that there are possibilities for more sustainable choices, and I know that's always at the forefront, and you're looking to look at efficiencies. Sure. I know that we're always looking for efficiencies in terms of sustainability. I'm sorry, it sounds loud in my own head. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, especially in light of the conversations we've had recently about the lawnmowers and the snow blowers, particularly. I mean, have we looked at the possibility of moving to battery-operated types of equipment, Mr. Knowles, for example, or?
Actually, someone had bought that they have battery-operated units at Half Moon, and our guys met with Jerry, I believe his name is, and he shared his experience with what they have. It's the newest technology. I believe it's a, I don't remember the voltage on it, but they have a DeWalt system, double battery, a backpack blower. I believe it's maybe $800 for the unit. But we also have battery-operated units. Not as expensive, but they just don't hold up to what we have. We use our battery-operated units to blow off in front of the doorways, at the district office, and at the main entrance for the students, as well as in front of the doorways here. The average runtime you get on them are maybe 25 minutes to 45 minutes. So it's not really economical for us because you don't get much work done with it.
They're not really commercial grade, I guess?
Well, I believe what they have is commercial grade, but I'm sure they will improve over time. It's just not there yet.
Not there yet.
Okay, thank you.
So you want me to start? So I'm just going to go through a few of them. I'm mindful of the time, and we can digest a lot of this later. It's very thorough, as usual. Carol, thank you very much. It's a fine presentation. In terms of the shared services, security consultant for $69,000. It's a lot of money to spend. I have sat in on the meetings. I read the proposal that you gave us, or I should say the summary of the safety and security coordinator. It looks like something that we need to do. Everything from emergency planning and drills and evaluations and making sure we're compliant. I find it hard to believe that your office could even possibly tackle any of what's on this list. So I don't know how we go without somebody like this at this point, especially since we're investing in security. And if you're telling us next year we're actually going to see this number come down because of what we get back, that makes me feel better because it is a higher number. The question I had is, it says that whoever we get in shared services is typically here, 7 to 3 or 8 to 4, and we get half the amount of days of that person on site for those hours. How does it work with the shared arrangement?
Well, when we work with another school district, we would be splitting the time. So we may say, okay, maybe Monday and Tuesday and half of Wednesday is one district and half of Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday is the other district. We had to set that up internally. We would definitely set up a schedule with set hours so we would know when we could work with that person. That's not to say that if they're in the middle of something that they're working on for Irvington and they happen to be the other district, that they couldn't take a phone call. They certainly could. And I think that's something we've talked about in terms of respecting that. Just like, we continue our work wherever we're doing, even, if I'm at a conference, I'm working. We would be able to handle that. But they would have set days so our administrators would know when they could reach out to them and when we could plan things. So from a calendar point of view, for setting up training or drills or whatever we're doing, meetings, we would know, okay, we can do a meeting on Tuesday because that person's always in district Tuesday. Like our safety committee meeting would be on a day when we knew this person would be there.
Gotcha. And this person would be a consultant in the sense that they're really training and making sure we comply. They're not going to be sitting at the front door.
No,
or any of
no,
those,
but we
those
would
roles.
also then ask them to kind of review our security guards and take a peek at that and take a look at how we can be more effective in things that maybe we're not experts in right now and looking at, so.
And do we have a manager of the security guards now? Is there somebody who we actually
Really,
employ?
it's me and Artie do it. Artie and I both, we do it. He manages some of the campus, I kind of manage Main Street School and Dow's. And we're the ones calling for replacements. We're the ones, every so often when I'm up at this campus, I'm watching what they're doing. So before I go back to Dow's, I'm looking at it. So is he, I'm walking down the hallway to check on the one at Dow's. We're constantly walking to see what's going on, but I can't do that all the time either.
And I would assume with more cameras being installed, this is a role that this person could also serve as reviewing those footage and making sure.
Certainly.
Right. And then in terms of the additional ask, which is the afternoon and event security, this would be one employee who has different hours than who we're employing now. In other words, you envision bringing somebody else on as opposed to extending hours of somebody that we already employ?
Well, the security guard will staff it. I just basically multiply the number of hours we needed additional times the security hour rate. So it wouldn't be an overtime situation. They would probably staff it so that I would only be paying the hourly rate. They have plenty of people. They work different shifts, so I would not be looking to pay overtime for that.
Okay. And the floating custodian, I thought I heard you say that there's a difference between the custodial staff and the maintenance staff, correct? So the custodial takes care of inside the building, the maintenance is on the grounds. This person who you're proposing, it's somebody who could serve both roles?
Well, it would primarily be a custodian role, but our custodians do have the ability to make minor repairs. That's one of the levels of a custodian. Cleaner really doesn't. A cleaner just does cleaning. So our night staff is really just cleaners. And the proposal here would be to have our custodians, when they need to change light bulbs or do things, that's happening during the day. But when you're short people, you're not getting to any of those things because now you're focused on a section and you're cleaning that area. Like, for example, our cafeteria, person who's assigned to the cafeteria, they're in the cafeteria all those hours and making sure that cafeteria just constantly is being cleaned for the next group of kids comes in. If that person's out, we got to pull from somewhere else. There's always that game, or I've got to bring somebody from the night staff up to the day. They might not be as familiar with what's going on in our buildings and our teachers and so forth. So, we have a very demanding staff and we have a very accommodating custodial crew, but there's limits to what we can do.
And when I think of our custodial staff, and maybe you saw the shout out that I gave on the Facebook page the other day for them out there working in the snow and the great leadership that Gary provides, there's just not enough of them to go around. When we think about a special event, when there's a program in a school, when there's setup required, when we set up in this room, we're pulling folks away from cleaning. As Carol said, when people are out, we're moving shifts around, we're pulling people away from other duties. So they do a great job on a daily basis, but you know what? We can always work harder. Our schools can always be cleaner, and having an extra hand is going to help us provide for better spaces for our students at the end of the day.
And capital repair versus building repair, just a quick question. I know that you had highlighted that under one aspect under capital repair is the air conditioners, and hopefully we can get to all 24, we can get to completion within 3 years. Of the capital repair that's proposed of the 163, how much of that is attributed towards the air conditioners, just so people have a sense of the percentage?
I think I've been budgeting, if you look at the number, I think I've been budgeting, was it $2,500 per air conditioner? Or I have the number, $1,500 per air conditioner, so I'll multiply that out. I'll have the details probably on the sheet, but that could have gone in either category, building repair or capital, but we've been usually putting like 1 or 2 in building repair, but because of the volume of numbers, the total aspect of it, I put it in capital this year. Because it's really something that we're doing in addition.
Okay.
And a lot of that number is toward the electrical work. It's not really the unit of the air conditioner.
Okay. In capital repair, also just for repaving walkway leading Broadway from high school, I'm just curious how the decision's made, whether or not to hold off on some of that pavement work in connection with the bond as opposed to including it within the operating budget.
Gary.
Just down past the rock on the hill down to Broadway is deteriorating, or eroding due to the rain and the weather we've been having. And as you know, we have to use salt on that because it is a hill, and it does ice over when we have storms. So we need to repair that.
And I would add a layer to that as well. So not only do you think of the you know, the casual pedestrians, the students coming and going from school, our neighbors walking from our school, but we also think when we're moving our students in large groups. So I think back to when we had our required evacuation drills, bringing it back to emergency readiness, the sidewalk is too narrow. It's only about 3 feet wide, and we literally had a couple students fall and a staff member fall just because they lost their footing with it being so narrow. So a part of this is not only restoring what is failing, but try to make it about a foot wider so it's safer to navigate.
I'll just go quickly just through the last few ones, Carol. Transportation has been one I've spoken about since I've been on this board. The numbers just keep inching up, both for private school and special education. I still would love to find out if there's ways to offer vouchers to parents who are entitled to private school busing, but yet their child is not taking the bus. I mean, I know once they sign up for the bus, the ridership is low, it's not consistent. That number, I know we break it down eventually, how much we spend on private versus special ed. But again, likewise with special education, I'm just curious if you could comment on something.
We did have a meeting in the quad of the 4 groups that share. The quad districts, that 4 schools that share transportation together. And we talked about a lot of things with private school. One of them is trying to get obviously more ridership by extending out to other schools. We'd have the opportunity to put students on the bus for up to 90 minutes. Right now, some of the runs are almost 60, maybe even a little bit longer. Sometimes if you go a little bit longer, but that's just a really tough thing to have a student be on the bus that long. We could potentially look at public transportation, putting kids on Metro North trains or things like that. That's viable to us. We have one situation where we are paying the parent who transports the child, which we are allowed to do. We're only really allowed to reimburse them the IRS mileage rate. But we are doing that with one parent, where that's more cost effective because that would have required a single bus to that particular location. So there are situations where we do that. We could look to do it more. One of the other costs that I've increased is the monitor cost, and we're exploring, because the bus company is going to be, they're telling us they're going to be raising the cost of the monitors we put on the bus. So we're all looking at whether or not maybe we want to put our own staff as monitors. Would that save us money? So we are looking at a variety of things. I'm budgeting for the worst case right now, but because you have to have it. But there are definitely things that we're doing that hopefully will come in a little bit less.
Okay. I mean, I will just, again, make a plea one more time to look at incentives to give to parents. I mean, even if it's mileage, I think some parents will sign up and get that mileage back because their child is only riding the bus, once in a while when they can't be driven. And then
Right.
once some of these students even get their license, I mean, we know, we talked about this for years, ridership is low, and yet the cost keeps going up. So I think we have to come up with some other solutions to at least try and pilot for 1 year and see if it works.
Yeah, and I think, sending out a letter to parents saying, are you using the bus? The problem is once you tell them that they have to commit, right, they say, oh, I want to keep it, because they know they have that right.
That bus stops regardless
And the bus
all
stops
year.
there, and you're right, most of the times the student is not
Empty.
on the bus,
Mhm.
especially at the higher level. So it's an unfortunate thing, and then we route that bus every day that way. So it is something that, if we had better partnership with some of our members of the community, we might be able to lower that cost, but.
Just an example you were sharing about the mileage piece, is that was worked out specifically because of the circumstances, but generally would parents be aware that that's an...
I've offered it on occasion, like there's a situation where right now I might be offering it to a parent that is in a situation where their child is constantly getting nauseous on a bus, and so we're looking at an alternative because I can't reduce the bus time for that student. So there's times when I look at it for an individual case and I'll offer it, but it's something we can look into more.
Yeah,
I
but
mean, would there be I'm sorry.
yeah, you can opt, I mean, I think what you're asking is it legal? Yes, we could write a letter saying if you want to opt out of the bus for special education or for private, if you do, we reimburse you this amount of money.
And is that consistently cost effective?
You have to analyze each one of these on an individual basis. I mean, if we're running a bus to Masters and I've got 10 kids on the bus and one parent wants to drive their kid and get reimbursed, no. That would not be cost effective for me. But if I'm going to a school that nobody else goes to and I have to add a bus to that school, which sometimes happens, then it would potentially be cost effective.
Or
So
even Hackley could be cost effective. We don't
Right.
know because we don't know how many parents would opt out.
we have a decent amount of within the quad going to Hackley. So not those 2 schools, but there's other schools that are just one-off schools. And when they're a one-off school, that's where it gets very expensive. And we do try to combine different schools, and that's where you get bus routes that go 60, sometimes 70 minutes, a child on the bus. so.
And some options, can you list some of the other options, and some require a public vote and maybe others don't?
Well, the only things that would require public vote is if we were to actually change the mileage limitations within the school. So for our in-district busing, right now, we're at a quarter mile for elementary, and we're at 1.25 miles for our secondary level. If we were to make that higher, the state limit lets you go up to 2 miles for elementary and 3 for high school. So if we were to increase that, that would take a vote, because we've already established our own limits. Then we could lower our in-district cost, because we would have fewer students on our in-district buses. So, you know, right now we have pretty much 80% or 90% busing on the elementary level, so.
And on buses, well, I certainly don't want to focus on it for too long, because it's $5,000 in comparison to this $14 million budget you put. I remember the conversation last year with the late bus, and we said if ridership was low, this was a pilot year that we'd reevaluated. 0 to 1 students, an empty bus, and, you know, environmentally what that does, and as well as I'm sure, you know, what it requires of you and your work that you lead in making sure all these buses run on time and you address parent concerns. It concerns me that we're still having a late bus. If the survey shows that it's that low, I'd be hard-pressed to say we should run it again.
Yeah, I would advocate at least leaving the north run, because that's where we have the ridership, and then making that south run, you know, just be combined in it, so we have only the one late bus. For the occasional student that needs to go south, maybe quickly goes south first and then goes north to that, you know, or vice versa, depending on the run. But I would agree that we should probably end up with just the one. But I think it is important for those 5 or 6 students that run it, because they're now participating in activity that they probably weren't participating in prior.
You've taken, I think, all my questions, so I don't know if you have something.
Yeah, I actually have a couple of questions about transportation. When was the last time we put an RFP out for transportation?
So those contracts get rebid by Ardsley, who manages our transportation. We rebid the out-of-district last year. The in-district was 2 years ago. And then the company has and then this year we're up for athletic and field trips. The hope is that actually we are able to renew a contract that we have existing. Because when you go out to bid, the prices now are way higher. And what the problem is that companies are not bidding on them. So in a sense, there was last year when we did the out-of-district bid, only Royal Coach and one other company bid it. And the other company didn't even have the services that we needed to fulfill the contract, so they were discounted. And it's tough, because when there's no competition, there's like the sky's the limit on what they can ask. So that's what's worrying me right now. We are working with them to say here's what we need to have in this bid. I'm also looking at asking Ardsley to increase maybe some of their bus capacity, and maybe look at Terrytown has their own buses, and could we piggyback off some of their buses if they have excess capacity, because we need to create some competition for Royal Coach and some of the other bus companies out there. And it's difficult because no one has place to store the buses during the day. No one has space. Everybody's using their land for parking or for fields or whatever. So none of our 4 districts have space, and this is the issue. So in short of leasing space, which then gets expensive, the proposition for owning your own buses is tricky, but that is something we also are exploring, and I've been insistent on that. At least we look at the numbers for this. So every meeting I go to, I'm like, where's the numbers? Have we talked to Terry? What are we doing? Because they have buses. Maybe we can use them, especially for some of our athletic and field trips after school when their bus runs are done.
So potentially this year you'd be bidding out for athletics, you said?
Yeah.
Okay, because that's an interesting idea about Ardsley and Tarrytown, because consistently we're hearing a lot of complaints about the buses consistently being late for after-school activities.
Once again, they don't have the driver, so what they're doing is they're finishing their runs, and as soon as those runs are finished, they're using those drivers to do the athletic runs. And this is a problem for every district in Westchester right now.
Right.
No matter what bus company you're using, this is the problem. So they're basically telling us, don't even bother asking for the bus at 3:15 or 3:30. You're not going to get it until 4 when your bus runs are done. So competitions can't start till 4:30 or later, because you just can't get the students to a competition.
Okay, so, I mean, it's interesting, maybe Ardsley and Tarrytown, but I'm sure they have athletic competitions as well, and they're using their buses, but that's an interesting concept if they have any extras, right, to maybe.
Or we share in the cost in them purchasing a bus.
Yeah.
And Ed.
And they maintain them?
Right, it's just a matter of where would they park. Again, Ardsley says they don't have any space to park any more buses, so.
Okay, well, what does one bus do for us, though?
No,
You know?
it's not maybe just one bus, it's the concept of adding enough to give Royal Coach competition or other bus companies that would be bidding us.
Okay. And here, you have a variance, you're going down for in-district busing by $83,000?
Yeah, basically, every year I'm getting better at allocating from the bills we get, which is really in-district and which is out of district. And it turns out on our in-district bill, we also are being billed for some special ed and private school runs because some of our buses overlap. So we've now actually mapped it better because I really wanted to know what the cost of each of the areas was. So when I budgeted last year, I didn't have all that information, so I'm just reallocating properly.
So it's the $83,000 is coming out of the in-district, and that's what makes up part of the 160?
The variance is a flip-flop.
Interesting, okay. All right. Anyone else? I'm just curious on that one note, when we have transportation coordination, we pay for a transportation director and a transportation coordinator?
Yes.
The difference between the job?
Well, part of that is my salary. We allocate it to transportation, and the reason we do that is so we can get state aid.
Right. And the other, though, the
Is
other
Ardsley.
is
Is
Ardsley.
Ardsley, yeah. Because we get a direct aid on our transportation, so we try to maximize that. There's rules on what you can include and what you can't.
And I actually, regarding the late bus, have you been analyzing it month by month from the beginning of the year till now?
I think pretty much from October, we've been getting the usage rates.
Okay. I would like to see what those numbers look like. A bus for 0 to 1 kid just sounds kind of silly.
Yeah.
5 kids for $5,000. I mean, I kind of want to see what these, maybe some months are more than others. I would like to see it go through the remainder of the year. I would think the largest ridership would be now during the winter months because it's dark out, but at the same time, we don't offer many after-school sports and activities during the winter months, so you kind of think that it's going to go down anyway, but fall and spring are the bigger months.
I have one more question.
And sorry, and about the late bus, part of that was tied to, they were going to be offering extra help at the middle school. That was the ask. That was one of the reasons for it. So do we have that analysis as to, how many kids are actually staying for extra help and homework support at the middle school?
I can check with David.
Thank you.
I have a question. I noticed that nowhere in this was there any indication of anything to, maybe it's not even known, the 2 gym floors, the Gina Mar gym floor and the campus gym floor. I happen to know just because I recreate on them frequently in terms of playing basketball, and they are really dangerous.
It's in there. So one of the things we did this year, it's in the maintenance contractual. We outsourced, we tried to do that in-house this year, and we realized we can't. We can't do the same job that they do. So we put that back in the budget this year. It's in the maintenance contractual.
So prior, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, we sourced it out. And they did it in-house, but by doing it in-house, you're buying the materials through BOCES. And the quality wasn't the same, which is why they're not holding up as well. That we tried to save money, so it's better to go out. And pay a little bit more because it's a better job.
Is it the wrong time to ask what those things are?
It's what they refinish the floors with.
It's like a specific chemical, or what is it?
Yeah.
Got it.
It's just really quality control of the materials. It's not the same when you buy it.
And then as much, I'm applauding our custodial staff along the way, there's a piece to it that comes down to the expertise in the application of the product. So where they're able to provide a better product than we purchase, but it's also people that are experts in doing it and that are doing it, on a daily basis as opposed to our crew that's doing it, a couple times a year.
Okay, if you don't mind taking a few questions from the peanut gallery down here. I don't know if it would be helpful to the folks who have stayed here tonight. We see BOCES services and other charges in many portions of the operations budget. Would it be possible to highlight what some of those are, so that we, or maybe where the changes are? Would be
I
helpful.
started that. I haven't had a chance to finish it for this presentation. I should have something more for the March 5th one.
Perfect, thank you.
Because I just couldn't finish it with everything else was what was going on right now, but I will definitely get to that. It's on my list.
Thank you.
I had a question, back to the shared services security consultant. Has there been any discussions about coordinating protocols between the shared districts? I know that we've had incidents about Terrytown and Dobbs Ferry in the past year, in which I observed that our responses in each district were not the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, so we're looking at a shared service that we're proposing between two districts. So if successful through the budget process, we may have a couple districts fighting over it. But we've actually, the conversations that we've had have engaged Dobbs Ferry and Terrytown, both whom are very interested in the service. I do want to back up and say that the service isn't something that is marketed. It is a service that was actually developed at the request of school districts because of the very needs that we're talking about, and then developed with those school districts and Alteris, the security company, and then they introduced the COSER through BOCES. But in fact, in our conversations, we talked about those very sort of things and the synergies that could be generated in having common practices and protocols, but also being able to align our efforts if we were in positions where we had to evacuate facilities, how we could coordinate efforts and use one another's school grounds to be able to support each other's needs in a crisis. So for example, if we had a massive flood here at the campus and we had to move all of our students, we couldn't have them all sit at our elementary schools for the rest of the day. So there's that possibility we could actually move students to Dobbs Ferry, for example, and utilize the gymnasium there for a period of time until we were able to transport our students home or resolve the problem here. But no, there's definitely lots of opportunity for synergies, and I believe there's going to be also opportunities for additional shared services or at least collaboration on efforts related to school safety and security that'll grow from.
Anyone can jump in if you have other questions.
I did have one, but I'm not really sure if it's part of this budget, because I know we had discussed at another time that because we may be having change in our voting procedures because of some changes upstate, that we might have additional costs for bilingual materials. Was that something that we had to think about in this particular budget in terms of our communication costs?
We do, and I should have pointed that out. It's actually in the Board of Education budget, there's a plus 4,000 for Spanish materials, because we have to provide in Spanish. But we had a minus 4,000 because I had budgeted for 2 votes this year, and now next year I wouldn't be budgeting for 2 votes. So it's basically washed itself out. So it's a plus and minus.
Yeah, I was
But
looking in
yes.
the wrong part of the budget. Thank you.
No, that is part of this budget, but it is important to note that we will be looking to do many of our documents in Spanish, as we're now required to do.
Okay, thank you.
Related to that, I know that the state just passed a number, I guess those don't take effect yet. There's another vote in terms of the voting, absentee voting, that sort of thing. So that doesn't take effect at this point. Okay. Just with the facilities vehicle, connecting it to the facilities building discussion and the bond discussion, is this an additional vehicle, and is that considered in terms of the planning on that side?
Well, the pickup truck would probably be a replacement.
Right.
The other maintenance vehicle will be an addition. We don't have one now, the maintenance van. The other thing we're looking at is potentially looking to seeing if we could buy a used truck. Something I'm exploring how we go about doing that. If we can.
A what truck?
A used one. So, that's something we're exploring. I don't know if that would bring us more problems or not, but I have safety concerns with doing that. But so we're looking into it. Gary's looking at who might have done that with other facilities and other districts if they've ever done that, just to cut that cost down a little, because it is expensive to do it right now. So.
I just want to hone in, with the initial planning around the facilities building, there was 3 pickup trucks and a... 4.
We have 3 pickup trucks and a dump truck right now. A pickup truck with a dump attachment.
So this is a 5th vehicle and the van?
Right, well, we're expecting one of ours to basically not be useful within the year. So that's why I'm budgeting for it, because one of them is getting, the repairs are pretty extensive now, and we're afraid it may not make it. So at some point, you stop putting.
Are we going to be at 4 or 5 vehicles?
Well, we would be back at 4 if that one that we. Right.
Allow me to clarify. I think, Mr. Hanna, your point is correct, that we still would have a fleet of 4 trucks.
4.
But we'd be actually looking to add a fifth
Fifth is a
vehicle,
van.
which would be a van for our maintenance employees.
And so in terms of what was shared, we're not accounting for that in terms of potentially having, we may have a different plan that comes out of the discussion, but initially it was an attempt to have a place that could hold, or places that could hold all of the vehicles indoors. So that's not accounted for in the current planning of the
No,
line.
the maintenance van would be parked outside, but again, it's not one that's being used for grounds and work and getting full of salt and all that stuff. It's not heavy duty, it's more of a vehicle that could stay outside.
Mike, can I just jump in?
Yes.
There was a question, I remember, on Saturday as to why we don't lease our vehicles if we are going through them so quickly.
I mean, we are getting more than 3 years out of a vehicle, and we can look into leasing, and that's another thing we are looking into, whether or not we could do that. For the most part, we try to stay away from leasing because it obligates us in the future, but it's something we can definitely look at.
Can you clarify, Carol, when we use the term lease oftentimes in a school world talks about financing. So it's like a lease purchase. And when we think of our vehicles that we may have for our homes, we think of a lease, you think of a payment every month for 2 to 3 years, then you give the vehicle back. So when you say looking into leasing, can you clarify?
We could certainly financing is what once you pay it off, you own it. That's one way of achieving things over time. Leasing, what you give the vehicle back when the lease is up, and then you get a new one, and so you have a constant lease payment. So you're basically committing to always having a lease payment. So there's, it's something that we're going to look into. I know we in the past have not wanted to do a lot of leasing. We were trying to get away from the installment purchase type debt, but it is a way of getting things and maintaining it and having a constant number. So it's something we can revisit.
I would be a little concerned about leasing these trucks.
Yeah.
Because you hand it back after 3 years. I mean, I see what our trucks look like. I mean, they have 12,000 miles on it, and they look like they're all rusted, they're all falling apart. I know we've had them for a while, but the damage that could be done within 3 years, taking on and off plows and everything else.
That's where we kind of have to look at whether or not a leasing company would allow that kind of a lease.
Right.
Because, it's not your everyday car that you're just driving around. It's something that is taking, as you say, a lot of abuse.
Right. I would like to know if other schools do it.
We're
and what that
we're
looks
actually
like.
researching right now.
Anyone else?
I'm sorry to go back to, Ms. Mills, to the battery-operated, lawnmowers and electric rechargeable ones, just to say what you were saying. I guess I'd be interested to know, instead of like a condominium complex using them, whether we could find out anything anecdotally. I'll look myself on whether other school districts are making that switch over for sort of more green-oriented groundskeeping.
Yeah, and I'll check with them and see if they're selling to any districts.
Yeah.
See what they're selling to any districts.
It would be great to get an update on it, because perhaps things have changed. So thank you.
In terms of the considerations, someone cited earlier from the long-range planning, what might be available under the tax cap. Do you have that figure currently?
I'm still working through the revenue picture, and that's going to drive the expenditures. So there's a lot of moving parts here. So that's why that usually comes up in the next presentation.
All right, so we shouldn't start tearing each other apart for which
No, not yet.
consideration
It's a little bit early
Not
still.
yet.
Okay.
And
So
not
hold
at-
up, hold up.
And not at 11
One more
o'clock at
question,
night.
Okay.
Dave's got a question.
I don't take this question the wrong way, please. And if I forgot the answer already, so be it.
It's 11.
No, I might have forgotten the answer, but $40,000 for the data consultant from 2 years ago? Is that for the curriculum meeting, or that should be not for tonight, right?
That'll all be in the next
Isn't that falling
presentation.
under-
You can get us in 2 weeks.
No, I'm not trying to get you, but I said, didn't you put it under something else, or was that
It's all in
something else?
it's all in the next section, this 2,000 codes. It'll come up in the March 5th
It'll
presentation.
come up in that one, okay.
Okay.
I thought she put it
Good
in.
segue.
Okay, so do we want to open it up to community members? Anyone else? I did want to note, we could always make a challenge into an opportunity. I'm hearing that there's some opportunities with time in terms of the high school master schedule, and if we can't get the buses back in time, maybe that's the opportunity for looking at late start. Just a thought. Anyways, we have an opportunity, if you missed out 3 hours ago, to ask questions related to the budget, and we'd ask you to use the microphone and introduce yourself by name.
And I'm really going to keep you to 3 minutes.
And we have our timekeeper who wants to get us out before midnight.
This is my wheelhouse, so I'm still Erin Bernstein, the mother of a third grader, although much more tired. Carol, it's awesome. Your presentations are great. You're so calm and collected. Don't count that towards my 3 minutes. Yep. Can we, and I've been asking for this, can we add actual data to it? Because I think it would just help with some of the questioning when we asked about the board budget and the 4,000 that was there and not there. If we could see actual spend from last year and maybe year-to-date through December or January.
So that's on our website already? The actuals from last year's was posted on our website.
Can we do it comparatively? Because otherwise we got to print out all these documents. It would be great to see it in this presentation comparatively and then show also the year-to-date. Just how I think, like, because then I can see where where the movement is as opposed to budget, and it sort of goes back to Dave's question about the data analyst. It's buried in the budget, but it's not in the actuals, and we can't see the actual change. Okay, I have lots of questions. I hate to harp on the after-school bus, but I harped on it in last year. Can you just remind me, is it $5,000 per bus per semester, or it was only $5,000 for the whole year per bus?
For the year.
For the year. So it was 10
per bus.
No, per bus. So it's 10,000. So
75 for one, 10 for
10 for two. So if I recall, last year we budgeted $20,000 for the two buses. So there's $10,000 that I guess is just in out-of-district spend now. The other thing is, and we sort of touched on this, is part of the ask was because it was going to increase participation in after-school programs. So I'm curious if those 6 or 7 kids on the bus were in programs last year, because if they were, then they're not, we didn't increase participation. And I'm also curious, are those 6 and 7 kids, would they have been eligible for regular busing to the high school and middle school campus? Because kids aren't eligible, right, if they live out if they live within 1.5 miles. So are they now getting busing because they stay for the after-school program, but they wouldn't have had it before if they left on time? So just find it interesting, that's all. And maybe there's a cheaper way to do it as opposed to the bus, that's all. And I know it's a small amount of money, but I could also argue there's probably lots of places where there's small amounts of money spent that add up to bigger amounts. Can we insure against tax certs? Is that at all possible? As opposed to taking hits every year? Can you buy an insurance policy against that?
No.
You can't. I didn't think so, but I thought I'd ask. Deb asked about the transportation coordinator, and sort of goes on with what Michael said. How does the $61 million compare to the long-range plan total expenses that we had shown for this year? So you showed $61 million of total, I thought $61 million total spend. Was that, maybe I looked at the slide wrong, I'm tired.
I'd have to kind of go back, I don't have it in front of me,
Okay,
Karen.
that's fine. If we talked about green equipment, is there an opportunity for green vehicles?
I think that was actually referenced in one of our capital project meetings, that idea if we were to construct a facility somewhere that we could potentially put in a charging station, that we look to future vehicles that we could potentially purchase.
Okay.
Green vehicles.
Okay. So just to Michael's point, there's so many moving pieces right now that it's hard to remember how to connect everything, so.
One last question, because now you're over. Make it a good one.
I know, I'm looking to see, I had a lot of stuff.
Well, you could always email us, you know that.
Oh, is it possible to get an analysis of the reserves over the last 5 years? I'm just curious to see how they've built up, and while I don't advocate for using reserves, if we have a significant amount that's built up, maybe some of it could be used for a phone system or a vehicle or more one-off expenses as opposed to ongoing operating expenses.
Our financial statements are on our website, and the analysis of reserves is part of that. So I can show you how to look at that and give you that information.
I can put it
And
together.
a couple years ago, we did a number of documents.
That explain
the reserve.
Yeah,
and
no,
that's
I know.
We can do that,
We can
but
go
all
back.
of that is in there, and the documents actually pretty much
All right,
do
I'll
a
put
good
it
job of explaining the reserves as well, so.
Okay. Oh, can I ask one other question? Does a universal lunch eliminate the need for a maintenance floater? If normally you have one maintenance person cleaning up for lunch on the campus, and now you only have one lunch period, how does that impact?
We'd still have middle school lunch periods.
Okay.
And I would say that, as I've referenced before, there's plenty of needs around the district, but the person would be busy.
Thank you.
Hi, still Della Lenz. I just have a quick question. The documents that you were provided, I know, Deb, you had mentioned something about the shared service. If there's any documents that y'all are receiving that we don't have here, or could you put them on board docs or attach them to some sort of schedule so that we have the same information that y'all have, and also more detailed information about the role of the shared services consultant and the floating custodial, just more detail so we get a better perspective of where the money is going.
Greetings once again. Question, I want to go back to...
You just need to stay by the mic. Thanks.
I'd like to know about this standalone toilet. To me, that's a big issue, putting a toilet in front of my house. So I looked over by the garden area, by the library, and there's water there. There's a solid wall that faces west. And I'm wondering, I need to know, why can't a toilet be built on that? You know the area I'm talking about? There's a solid wall. Why can't you put a male, female toilet, two toilets there, rather than in front of my house?
So, Mr. Shep, so just for a point of clarity, the conversation now is targeted right on the budget presentation.
Okay.
But what I will say, and you bring up a good point because we did not address it earlier, just as we're reflecting upon the larger building that we talked about at Dow's Lane, there's consideration and discussion in around bathroom and location as well.
Okay.
So don't think that even if the building was to be different, or the building was to disappear, that a bathroom would still be standing there. We're considering a variety of options.
Okay. An off question, if there's only one student, can you call Uber and let them drive them to the location?
We can't do Uber. I mean, Uber, we can't control the driver. We would have liability issues.
Okay.
Or taxis. I mean, people have done it on occasion when there's absolutely no other way to do it, but it's really a very scary proposition that you would not know the driver of, and all of our bus drivers are vetted by New York State. They have to pass a certain training and sexual, make sure they're not predators. There's a whole host of things that go into drivers.
Right. And just about the green, using battery-powered machinery, I have a landscape business. I work in the city, so I'm obligated not to use gasoline. I just find it much easier to use battery. And I found at Home Depot they have the Ego, and I have a lawnmower, I have hedge clippers, and I have backpack blowers. And I was at a big nursery, and they had like a $1,200 backpack blower, and I said, that's great. And then I went to Home Depot, and they have for $209, you get a backpack with a bigger battery than you'd buy with a handheld one, and they have a quick charger for it. So with blowers, what's that? 45 minutes. So for $209, you can try it out. I bought 4 or 5 of them because they were pretty good. I use them all the time. They have hedge clippers, chainsaws. I use the same battery for the chainsaw I use on the lawnmower, and I use it on the backpack blower. So I have a bunch of batteries, so I just bought a snow blower with that battery system. Worked great. I was using it yesterday, and it's just really powerful.
Thank you, Mr. Sheps, and I believe you know where to find him if you want to follow up. So.
Anytime.
Any other questions related to the budget? All right, thank you. So we have, in fact, yet another conversation in front of us. Do we need a 5-minute break, or are we okay to plow on?
Let's go. Let's keep going.
Press forward.
All right.
Wrap it up.
I admire your devotion. You're now, is this, if I'm correct, we're looking at the discussion of our 2019-2020 district calendar.
So, thank you. This is part one of two parts of a conversation. As you know, each year we go through a process where we look to develop a school district calendar. And in doing so, much like the budget, there's always challenges that we face, and most of them, ironically, are driven by the calendar. So when we look at a school district calendar each year, we try to come up with a sequence of days where we can maximize learning, try not to break up chunks of time too frequently. We try to make sure we're meeting all of our SED requirements. So State Education Department requires a particular number of hours that we satisfy. So I can tell you right now we have staff members that are completing these wickedly complex spreadsheets that now State Ed requires to calculate the number of hours and minutes in a given school day, school year. So we're going through that process. Our calendars typically include 184 days. The 180 days are traditional instructional days. 4 of those days are superintendent conference days. By state rules, we're able to now count 2 of the conference days that happen before the school year. So traditionally in Irvington, we facilitate 2 conference days in the month of August. They will count towards school days as well. And then we have 2 days throughout the year, typically one in October, November, and then another in March. And I think, Raina, our next is what, March 13th? Does that sound right? 15th for our next conference day. When we also look at our calendar, we also look when the testing calendar comes up. So we consider the New York State tests 3 through 8. We think of the Regents exams on the secondary level as well as AP exams, because we certainly cannot schedule conflicts there. And we don't want our children to be on a vacation period right before they come back and have to sit down and take an important test. We consider contractual obligations. So contractual obligations can point in a couple different directions. Our civil service employees are guaranteed certain holidays off by civil service rules. Additionally, we consider past practice. Past practice points to the 184 days as well. Some school districts have additional days in their calendar than us, but that is something that has been negotiated. Where our calendar doesn't have a specific number, our contracts don't have a specific number of days allotted to it. Past practice points to the 184 days that we have here in Irvington. There are particular federal and religious holidays that we must honor. Where possible, we try to have some consistency with BOCES. This speaks to transportation costs because we have a number of students that attend BOCES programs. So we try to put fewer buses on the road on fewer days. And ultimately, we always try to allot for a given number of snow days. So when we think about where we are right now, in Irvington, we've utilized a number of days already. We've had 3 days that we've used of our standard 4 that we allot for. So when we look at the proposed calendar at this point in time, some highlights to point out, and one that falls at the bottom is something that I'm particularly pleased with this at this point in time. So one of the challenges here, we look at an early Labor Day being September 2nd, which results in the first student day on September 3rd. I want to highlight that that's a benefit here in Irvington because of our 2 superintendent's conference days in August. There's a number of school districts that you'll find across the state whose contracts do not permit for superintendent's conference days to happen before Labor Day. Therefore, teachers come back immediately after Labor Day rather than students. The benefit there is that we have students in class longer before assessments that are important. So we think of students that are looking at AP exams and other types of tests. We know that students in other areas of the country start school earlier than we do in the Northeast, so it adds additional days of instruction prior to those important exams. We look at the challenge here that, again, Labor Day being early, September 2nd, the state establishes rating day. Rating day is to be the final day of a school year. That is kind of the old school model of thinking about when you're grading Regents exams and assessing students. So the state establishes the date that we must run our school calendar to, and that is the last faculty day of the school year, which makes the last student day the day that precedes that. So in doing so, some years, and this is one of them, you have to find a way to go from September 3rd, our first student day, all the way to June 26th, which is a challenge. Our December break, you can look at this year, December 23rd to January 3rd. Again, a longer break, but I'll point that out to you, similar to a calendar that I think we had 3 years ago. A traditional winter break, a spring break, 6 days rather than 5. So that actually goes from a Monday through a Monday. A 4-day Memorial Day weekend, the last student day being June 25th. And then professional development. We have our superintendent's conference days as referenced on August 28th and 29th. This year we're looking at March 5th, and there's where I got the March 13th for next year. We're currently looking at our PLRDs, which are a new addition to the school calendar, and I'll highlight in a second some of the challenges that we have. We're finding lots of benefit from them. When you step back and you think about feedback and analysis, one of the challenges is that we're really only a couple months into them. They started in October, if you recall, and so we're now in February, we've only had 4 months worth of them. But we'll see some challenges that come up with the scheduling of them and what we're trying to work through now with our administrators, and we'll have conversations with our faculty association as well in the coming weeks. But the one highlight to point out is that we're actually looking to have a superintendent's conference day on election day. So as you may or may not know, the actual election is for national state elections. Dow's Lane is one of the locations where voting is hosted. So we have members of the public that are actually entering our school building, and in doing so, they aren't directly interacting with our children, but we're bringing strangers right into our gymnasium. We set up protocols whereby they enter through the external gym door. The district pays money to bring another security guard on just to monitor the area. We do so because it's actually cheaper than bringing a police officer on, which we'd have to pay for that overtime. So by having a conference day here, it actually pushes it back a little bit later than our preference, but it provides a safer experience for our students. So looking at an overview of the calendar as it stands today, you can see how the holidays shake out. The one thing that I will draw your attention to, you can see the areas in black are superintendent's conference days, November 5th being the election day, and March 13th being the spring conference day as well. But when we look to the traditional December, January holiday recess, it is a 2-week-long recess. If we were to look at following the typical pattern, we would have students that would be returning on January 2nd for a 2-day week. We know from experience that we'd have lower attendance on those days, but we also recognize that we have to find a way to get to June 25th. So looking at a larger block of time there, when we implemented that in past years, it was appreciated by our school community members. So you can see kind of how things play out. The 6-day break in April, and then a 4-day weekend looking at May for Memorial Day. So in doing so, when we look at our PLRDs, we typically look to start, typically this year we began with on Mondays and on Wednesdays, the 1st and 3rd of each month. So when we look at October, for example, the first Wednesday of every month is a faculty meeting day, so that provides that opportunity for continued learning by having 2 hours available for our teachers to work with their administrators or to work on curricular initiatives. But where we start to find some challenges, where you just go through and start to count and see where the 1st and 3rd fall, there are some difficult periods where we look at, for example, in April, the 1st and the 3rd. So April 1st, you would have a PLRD. You'd have 6 days off from school, and then you come back, and students would have essentially a day and 3/4, let's say, with an early release. That's a concern because we're worried about impact in the classroom. So when we look at that as one particular scenario, or we look at the month of January, where the first Wednesday of the month is actually now falling on a holiday period, we get into strange patterns of looking at then holding on the 8th and 22nd. It becomes a little confusing, and it's also then, once again, looking at some of the challenges of coming back from a long vacation, 2 days in school, and then an early release. So what our effort is going to be going forward between now and our next board meeting, when we'll present a recommended model, is to identify an appropriate sequence of when those dates would fall, and to try to minimize not only impacts on families, recognizing that some folks are going to have challenges finding coverage for their kids for a period of time, and adding to that is a challenge, but also coming up with sequences that not only support our teachers and provide that additional learning time, but also seek to not disrupt instruction as much as we possibly can. So in some areas, you may say it's a little bit of a backpedal from the initiative we pushed for the last 2 years and looked at the conversation 2 years ago, implementing it this year. But now we're trying to be practical and try to maximize the opportunity for our kids, and provide the opportunities for our faculty, for whether it be professional learning or curriculum work, but to do so in a way that's really thoughtful, that's been considerate of feedback that we received along the way also. That said, certainly can field any questions that the board may have, and then we'll bring forward with some more details at the next meeting. Mr. Graber.
Surprise. Want to cut me off?
Sure.
Maria's our resident expert, but we'll let you go ahead.
I know that's why I asked if she wanted.
Two things. One, we've heard from our parents from the elementary grades, when you're looking to schedule, I guess you're gonna look to, yes, parent-teacher conferences. And I get that you want to be consistent, the first and the third, the second and the fourth, but I think we need to be a little flexible with that, and some months it's just not going to work out that way. But I have a question about the last week of school.
Okay.
We've kind of been going away from those longer half-days, and that last week you're back up to 4 half-days. Why are we going backwards now?
So I guess that in one way we can look at it backwards. I don't have a copy of this year's calendar, but I believe when we look at what would be the equivalence of the 19th, the Friday preceding, is a half day. So this actually moves, I think we have 3 half days or early release days this year, and that would equate to 4. At the elementary level, and not to discount the secondary level, there's a tremendous amount of work in closing out the school year. When I think about our teachers, at Dow's Lane, for example, where the summer camp is hosted. Thank you. Yeah, so we have 3 days, so it's a Monday, Tuesday, and a Friday. We have 3 half days. Teachers are really struggling. They have to pack up their entire classroom as if they are moving because of some of the challenges there. So this has been one consideration. It's been a request that has routinely come forward from the Faculty Association to be considered of that time.
Good, Maria?
Yep.
I was going to ask a question, but then you kind of threw me off with that last statement, Dr. Harrison. Chris, I'm going to just make a comment before my question. I don't think, speaking as my individual, I don't think creating 4 half-days for staff is at the cost of 4 half-days of instruction to children is a good idea. That's speaking as a parent and educator. And also, less a question and more a comment, like to, I think piggybacking a little bit on kind of what you were saying, Maria, is request that we take a very good look at when we place those professional learning release days, because I'm sure we'll hear a comment about it shortly, but, you know, a couple of times it just sort of was very strange that all of a sudden there was, you know, a half-day release day, and then there was a day off, and just in terms of consistency of learning for students. And then the question I have is, and I should have asked it this past year, but I didn't. I wanted to see how it played. But I would love to, for all the professional learning release days, going back for this year, or at least summaries for this past year, but going into next year, have a sketch plan for what those days look like, so that when community people ask questions, this is why it's really important for teachers to be released early for this professional development that will assist your child in X. So I think it's very important for us to have a, it doesn't have to be super detailed, but like, this Wednesday release day is focusing on X, et cetera. I think it's important.
And I think there could be information that provided that would be reflective of the types of activities that happen, but to be able to, I don't think it would be a challenge to think of a principal being able to plan every single one for the entire course of the year because of the evolution of how some of the work does occur. But we could look to provide some further information related to the types of work that is addressed during those periods of time.
I would love to just echo that I think anything that we can learn about how these biweekly or twice monthly release times assist in the planning and the execution of professional development would help, because certainly it's a really common question that I get. Why does it have to be this way, and what's the benefit?
I'll just clarify my end. I support it wholeheartedly. I believe professional development is a super vital piece.
And I would say, I think that some of the points that you raise are a point of the narrative that led up to the introduction of them. So it sounds like we need to go back and revisit it, and then to bring that information forward.
Fine tuning.
And I guess the only other thing I'd just say on top of all of that is that if we're going to have the professional learning release days on top of the whole week of half days, the last week of school, I do think that for the dual working parents, we're asking a lot of them in terms of coverage for children. So I would love to hear more of what the teachers are saying as to why they need half days, certainly that many. And I'm sure there's a good reason, but I think to have that articulated, maybe you can tell us now, but at some stage, if that really is what you're proposing based on what the teachers are asking for, I think we should hear what it is that they're doing.
Right, because the packing up of I'm not minimizing the packing up of the school, but the reality is the kids are still there, so they can't really pack up.
But they do.
They have the last full day off, and I know there's other things to it, so I think maybe just an explanation. But I have a question. I know the aides, they are required to be there through the end of June. What is the official last day for teachers? Is it the last day of school for students, the 26th? Or are they also similar to the aides, which is the last month?
So I think we have like 4 things on the table right now.
Okay.
So I'm just going to work backwards with Maria's, then back to Deb's, and ask Raina to help jump in and speak to the elementary experience, having been an elementary principal and looking at the end of the year in responsibilities. So the last day for teachers is the 26th. Aides and the 10-month CSEA employees actually carry through the end of the month of June. But we actually have a flex in their contract where they come in to start, when teachers start in the beginning of the school year in August, to be able to support the needs and operations in the opening of school. So which poses a bit of a challenge, because we still need some aides to be able to support the operations at the end of the school year, in this case, the 29th and 30th. So when we speak about the PLRDs and the early release days in particular, by design, PLRDs were this year run October through May. Plan would be similar this year, so there would not be PLRDs in June. When we speak to the closing at the end of the school year, Raina, do you want to share some of the needs as seen through an operational side of the school as well as a teacher perspective?
Sure. I think that having been both a secondary administrator and an elementary administrator, I think there are needs at all the buildings. I think that always at the secondary level, there's just more flexibility. The kids come in and they take final exams and they leave. So there's always just more time. At the elementary, a lot goes on in that last week, from articulation, from grade to grade, students finalizing classes and making sure placement is ready to go to as much as it possibly can be. So there's a whole level around articulation that takes up a tremendous amount of time. And I know when we release early, I never want to minimize the strain on families, because it's a reality. But if Dow's Lane dismisses at 11:30, teachers have lunch till 12:15 or so, and then they have 3 hours. And 3 hours, aside from packing up their rooms, because, right, that sort of is a graduated process, but the meetings that go on during that time, there are grade level meetings that are happening, there are meetings with the building administration that are happening, school psychologists, all the components around students and student placement is huge. The other piece that I would say takes a fair amount of time is sometimes just grade level. So we are now very committed to the collection of data. So at the end of the school year, we are making sure that all of our data is in for all of our, it could be our Fontes and Pinnell diagnostic data, it's our last math module data, it's our foundations data. All of that data from Dow's moves to the next grade, moves to Main Street School. All of the data from Main Street School moves to the middle school. So there's a lot of conversation that goes on. It just doesn't happen instantly. So that time flies for our teachers at the elementary level. There's no perfect answer for it, but you will never walk through the elementary buildings at those half days and just see the teachers sitting around in their classrooms. You just don't see it. And at Dow's Lane for camp, I mean, it's a huge undertaking. So it's a combination of a lot of different pieces.
And it goes without saying, you can't have two different schedules for two different buildings or groups of kids, right? So, because you're emphasizing the work that needs to be done at the elementary level. In other words, you can't have the high school students going for 2 full days and not the half days, right? I mean,
Most of them are done with exams and done. They're not even
They're in their
school.
exam.
They're not in school, but they have the exams.
They're done by then.
But is that true? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that last week of half days doesn't apply to the high school?
Well, no, it doesn't mean that there aren't. No, there are students who are in, but again, they come, they take their exam, and they leave. Student teachers are grading exams, right? So the exams happen and they're being graded. But again, it's just a greater flexibility at the secondary level. You know, we have a whole grade level of kids who are gone, right? Your seniors are basically gone at that point.
And I want to say the one thing to highlight, that we do have requirements for the number of instructional hours in the school year. So even if we were to look to say that, well, you're going to make 2 full days and then have 2, like, superintendent's conference days, for lack of better terminology, we would have trouble necessarily meeting the state standards for the amount of instructional time. But you've posed a number of good questions in areas we'll come back equipped with some answers in thinking down the road. The one thing that I do want to separate from this process is that when we look at where we schedule and calendar the PLRDs, the process by which we go through and we do each spring with the administrators is actually the scheduling of events throughout the school year. So when we look at a uniform district calendar, this is something that applies to each of our 4 schools. When we talk about conferences, that happens at the elementary schools, that we actually sit down and go through process where principals go in or administrators go in and identify those days and negotiate those days. So there's pieces to it that our process in and around those the early release days can look different. So if we're falling on a 1st and 3rd, well, where does that conference day early release fall? So it has less of an effect on families. Where this year we had some that were piggybacked, that were problematic, and we heard some good feedback from parents on it.
Yeah, it was the first year. I mean, always going to be little bumps, right?
Yeah, and some of the challenges, like, it makes you wonder, and so it's new for us, and we're working through it, and we're trying to make it better. When we step back and think about, we go back to this presentation from probably the 2 prior years, I included data related to other area school districts that have regular early release days where it's a weekly occurrence. So that's inherent in their culture, and where it's new here, it's a growing period.
I had heard reference to, did one of the quad districts add a holiday or 2? You know about that? Could you check?
Add a holiday or 2? I wouldn't know.
How do you add a holiday?
How
do you add a holiday?
Like
Chinese New Year or one of the Muslim holidays? That's my oral.
Are you aware?
I am not by my response, but I could reach out to my colleagues.
Good question.
I mean, our population is shifting and it's shifting in other districts. I'm just curious what.
Yeah. Very good question.
Okay.
A smart question.
Open it up. No questions?
If there are any questions related to the calendar, we invite you to come to the mic, introduce yourself, and we ask that you keep the questions to 3 minutes.
And I have 3 kids Has that been considered?
Yeah, so we're considering our different options. We actually had a model that went back preceding this year where we had a series of delayed openings and early release days. The objective here was to try to have continuity where you could actually have work that's sequenced throughout the course of the year. So when you think about, as I referenced, that first Wednesday being 2 hours in a building, where there's that level of time, and that there can be continuity from, say, that first Wednesday to the third Wednesday, where you can have work that continues from week to week. So there's it's progressive in nature. We definitely did receive some feedback, and you and I had a number of email exchanges, and I know you shared some of your concerns with Ms. Chapnick in particular. The concerns, I have to say, were not overwhelming, but there were a few, but what I want to reiterate. No, I'm saying I don't think there was a large volume to them in the number of concerns, but what was important was the nature of the concerns and the feedback. I'm trying to extend a compliment to you. That
I don't get it.
I'm trying to explain that you made very clear points that are actually leading to the considerations and the look that we're giving our calendar today.
Right, but it sounds like to me they fell on deaf ears because you're still going to do the twice a month. And the amount, what is considered a school day? How many hours do you have to be in school for it to be considered a school day?
It's an annual number of hours, and contractually we have Dr. Kaur at the elementary school, 7:15.
6 hours. I can't believe it's really late.
I don't have the number.
Right, and I mean.
6 hours, I don't know, I have to think.
Yeah.
Because those half days at the end of the year, I mean, my kids are going to go in and watch movies. They're not going to learn anything. I don't even know why. And for a working parent with au pairs and this and that, it's ridiculous the amount of juggling that we have to do to accommodate these. It's not regular the twice a month. It's random days. It can't be regular. It can't be every other Wednesday. It works out to be random Wednesdays. And if I didn't have a group of people on the train that all work and sat there and said, oh boy, today's an early Wednesday, let's call the au pair. She has to be, it's a lot of juggling. It's a lot of work. And if it was once a month, it would be a lot easier.
Well, thank you for the feedback, and note that the conversations that we've been having, and I apologize if my comments did not come across clearly, the intent was that the feedback that you and others have provided have led to some of the consideration that's ongoing, and the fact that we don't have dates circled on the calendar as they do today has been based upon the feedback and the concerns that have been presented by folks such as yourself.
March 5th, that's going to be the final calendar?
I will be presenting the next draft should the board choose to adopt it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear a word.
It would be the next draft, assuming the board would choose to adopt it. So
And
the
that's
board
fine.
could provide additional feedback.
The board could say, could you please take a further look at it, or we could approve it. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Yeah.
By March 5th.
Potentially on March 5th. Are there any other questions related to calendar? Very good. So we will, thank you for all those questions. We will move to the consent agenda. Could I get a motion to accept tonight's consent agenda?
So
Second.
You got it, Brian.
Did you catch that, Elaine?
Brian.
Thank you. Good to have you back, even if temporarily. So we have some stipulation agreements, some appointments, and changes to clubs. We have some tax certs and some agreements and grants. Are there any questions related to any of the matters in our consent agenda items? Can I get a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. So I want to thank the PTSA for a grant called Getting Smart with Smartphones for the middle school and high school. And we've agreed, as we did last year, with the county center to have the basketball semifinals take place there. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. We do actually have another opportunity on our agenda for community comments or questions, hopefully going once. Our next public meeting is on well, we will announce it possibly sooner, but currently it's Tuesday, March 5th here in the campus presentation room. And I would like to see if we could get a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of talking about the employment history of particular persons. Can I get a second?
Second. Beth and David. Maura and David, sorry. The peanut gallery, we're going for me.
I did not.
David? All in favor? All right, let's take a 5-minute break. Thank you, everyone.
The scary thing is the scary thing is this is better. That's the frightening part. Could I get like an IEP for that or something? You know, like I could have to like be like remoted into the meetings or something.
Brian, you sound terrible.
Yes, well.
It sounds like it hurts.
Thank you.